boot her up. Hello, everyone. I'm joined today with a special guest, Project Management Wombat. How are you doing?
Yeah, good, good.
Hey, all right. So, Project Management Wombat, you hosted the meetups in Melbourne, Australia. Is that right?
That is correct. Along with my wife, who does one of the quite a lot of the art you see floating around back from the old days and also currently.
Yeah,
So
and
yeah,
she,
her and I organised it. Yeah.
yeah, and your wife actually did the cover for my first GamerGate book, GamerGate First Battle of the Culture War. So, if you like that cover, that was her work.
Yep.
All right, so we got a couple things. We're gonna jump into the GamerGate book interview stuff, but I like to keep it pretty open-ended in the beginning. Obviously, we got some stuff going on regarding the Sweet Baby Ink controversy. We can get into that, or first, I want to ask you too, because you hosted a GamerGate meetup in Melbourne, Australia, and this got a little bit of attention, some perhaps unwanted attention, and people called in a threat to the event,
Mm-hmm.
forcing it to be
Oh,
evacuated.
there was multiple. We had multiple meetups over the course of about 6 months, and at least two of them they got those threats. The first one they called up the venue and gave threats, and the thing is, we knew the barman. We casually knew the barman. He was talking to us, and he was aware of what was going on, sort of thing. And so the first time they rang him up and gave him a threat, he pretty much just laughed at them and hung up. Um, but the next, I think the subsequent meetup was on and got a threat, and yeah, they had to evacuate the venue because threat. We just sort of rolled our eyes. We were not shocked, and we just sort of kicked on to another venue. So yeah, there's no point letting them, making a big deal out of it. It was just like, oh yes, yes, okay, you're doing this, really? Not allowed to talk about it, not allowed to meet up, have a few beers, which was funny because quite a few of the people who I'm still friends with who came to the meet, quite a few of them were working in and around the Melbourne, well, the Australian independent games development community, put it that way. And they came along to these things because sort of they've been seeing what had been happening firsthand. And the thing is, the Australian game development community is extremely small and extremely cliquey, mainly because of economic reasons. In that, with a bit of history, back in the day around 2000, well, this just would have been just pre 2008 crash. The Australian dollar hit parity. And so what happened was there was a whole heap of gaming stuff in Australia. And my wife was studying sort of animation and game design at the time, and she saw firsthand that the industry just cratered because prior to that, with the exchange rate and tax incentives, you had companies could do stuff down here, and that if they're an American company, I think the US to Australian dollar was about a 40 odd percent difference at the time, right? So they could do stuff, essentially 40% cheaper down in Australia. But yeah, when the dollar hit parity, that just destroyed the industry. So it just became a very small group of cliquey indies. And yeah, you could see that you had the GDC crowd, they were run by all the usual suspects, and they were enforcing all the usual dogma. So this isn't just an isolated American thing. This is all over the joint.
And do you have reason to think that someone from this clique of people was responsible for the bomb threat? The threat?
I honestly don't. Look, I'm not gonna point fingers. All I know is someone called in threats. And it wouldn't be surprised if it was someone associated with it, but I'm not. I said I'm not going to directly accuse anyone because I don't know. But kind of sort of leads that it's either someone like that or someone who's just and as we saw back in the GGGate, you had a third faction, which was people who were trolling for the hell of it, who were more or less just poking both sides to stir up, It's like the old school days thing. If you got two kids having a fight, and then you got this one kid who's like trying to rile up both sides. So it could have been either. But at the end of the day, it's just said it didn't have any impact at all whatsoever. We just sort of rolled our eyes and just went to the next venue.
Which I like, though. As a historian, I guess I do have to ask: did the
Yeah.
police make any headway in their investigation
Nah,
into who did this, or?
nah. That's the thing. I honestly, it was, reported to the cops, and I never really followed it up because I don't expect them to, because my background, in technology, it's like, yeah, even back then, could have very easily faked phone numbers with Skype and whatever else. So, again, the Australian cops would more or less just look at it going, oh, it's a prank. There's no serious threat. So I doubt much police time at all was thrown at it.
And this event, the bomb threats, I know you say that you don't make a big deal out of it, but
Mm.
it doesn't seem like the media really covered it, like either the local press or even
No,
any sort of
and I
international or
get
games press.
no, and again, there's kind of a rule down here that they don't feed the attention whore. As such, like, again, if it was a plausible threat, you might have seen some media about it, but you know, I would imagine that they've done their due diligence and just gone, oh, it's just someone being an asshole, sort of thing. But yeah, there's also the whole, they don't like to encourage it, because if it's kind of a different mindset than the US in terms of, well, if we give them the attention, it's going to encourage them to do it in the future, right? So,
All
and
right.
I've basically been advised that from police, that I know. And I've sort of asked them about it, and they're like, yeah, unless it's an actual credible, threat. Other than that, they won't give them the time of day. That won't give them the satisfaction.
All right, we can definitely revisit the meetups later on. That is a planned question,
Yeah.
so we can talk about the fun aspects of it and not the less so fun aspects of it.
Mm.
But first, the Sweet Baby Ink controversy. You said that you've been following this a bit.
Oh yeah. And I'm not shocked, to be honest. I'm like, there was also sort of that back in the mind. I'm like, the usual suspects have been very quiet in the last few years, and now we know why. They've gone off and they're doing consultancy stuff. They've managed to circumnavigate, um, they've more or less attacked games management directly to completely circumnavigate the consumer. So, and even then, back in the days of the original GG, I really wasn't shocked, because it was very clear that companies were choosing to listen to them versus their actual paying customers. So sort of a lot of us went, well, if they're going to be like that, then all we can do is we can only focus on what we can control, which is our own wallets. So, yeah, we can make our choice not to spend money on companies that hate us. We can, advise friends and family to do the same. But beyond that, there's not much else we can do. So we all just sort of went off and did other things. And in a lot of cases, a bunch of us picked up other hobbies, sort of went out and metaphorically touch grass, actually touch grass, and just went out and did something else. And we just thought, well, there's kind of in Australia, fire is a big part of our culture in terms of the natural cycle. And we're all of the opinion of like, well, we need to see we need to see the old forest burn for the new forest to be able to grow. And it looks like that process was sort of delayed. What we now know is the things like the BlackRock, and various other investment firms handing out large amounts of money for sort of various DEI type stuff to prop these industries up. Well, now that the interest rates have gone back up and debt is no longer free, that process, I think, is now accelerating, because it was just being artificially postponed by that. So, yeah, we've been following that, and we're like, oh, right, so there's all the consultancy companies. That's why. And, so I'm glad that the sort of the next gen, as it were, is sort of noticing, and I think the media landscape's changed. Like I said, a lot of the gaming outlets that were either running cover for the likes of, well, I'm not going to name the other names. The literally who's. I'm not going to give them the time of day. Running cover for them. Well, a lot of those outlets don't exist anymore, and the ones that do, no one listens to anyway, because they've seen what they're like. So I mean, we've seen a couple of articles from things like Kotaku. I said all the usual suspects going, oh no, Sweet Baby doesn't do this. They don't force this. Like, they're not they're not a single company controlling the industry. I'm like, no, there's multiple consulting companies, and they're doing the whole, oh yeah, nice game, shame if something were to happen to it. right?
Well,
Yeah, you might get yeah.
so let's. I guess I'll give a quick
Mm,
overview, and you tell me if I got anything wrong.
mm,
Just for the audience and for the readers in the book, because they could be reading this decades from
mm.
now, they might not even know anything about this,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
this could be
yeah,
their first time hearing about it.
yeah,
So basically, there's a consulting firm. They're an openly progressive firm specializing in diversity, though they say that they also help with other areas of story writing as well, called Sweet Baby Inc. This company has worked with a lot of different games. They've worked with Alan Wake 2. They've worked with Suicide Squad. They've worked with a bunch of different companies, according to their website. And last year, some people were talking about this company on some online forums on Reddit, 8chan, NeoGAF, some other places. Kiwi Farms also talked about it. Um, a bunch of different communities online were talking about this company, but nothing really came of it. Didn't really become like a major controversy or anything like that. Um, then one person, Cabrutus, created a Steam curator page and associated Steam group where he just wanted to make a list of the various games that Sweet Baby Inc. has worked on so that they can inform the public and let them decide for themselves if they want to work on if they want to buy games, spend their money on games that this company has consulted on. Sort of informing the public. There's other Steam groups and curator pages that do similar things like this in regards to 60 FPS, so they're warning players if a game has 60 FPS or has DRM in it, things like that. So it's a pretty common thing on Steam, nothing like super out of the ordinary. Unfortunately, two of the employees of Sweet Baby Inc. have decided that they wanted to attack this group and shut them down for some reason. Um, they they encourage their followers on Twitter to mass report Cabrutus's Steam profile and get him banned, as well as get the group banned as well. Not for any actual terms of service violations, just because they didn't like him. And so,
yeah,
unfortunately,
yeah.
so this
But
blows
for
up into a
no
massive
particular story.
story.
Yeah.
This that happened on
Mm.
the February 29th of 2024, and the attack on the Steam group did. That's when it began. And so this became a massive controversy. A lot of YouTubers and independent media people have written about it. People are talking about it online on a huge number of places, and it blew up into a massive controversy. Now, some of the games journalists, the first one to cover it, I believe, was hang on, let me just how I can say her name. Alyssa Mercante of Kotaku, who I've reached out to but has not replied to me yet. She wrote an article for Kotaku in which she interviews the CEO of Sweet Baby Inc. and talks about the kind of consulting work that they say that they do. But she doesn't mention anything in the article about the harassment campaign that Sweet Baby Inc. employees had engaged in, nor does she ask her about this rather interesting line that is said by the CEO in one of her speeches at GDC, which I can read real quick if you don't mind.
Yeah, go for it.
She says, if you're a creator working in AAA, which I did for many, many years, put this stuff up to your higher ups, and if they don't see the value in what you're asking for, when you ask for consultants, when you ask for research, go have a coffee with your marketing team and terrify them with the possibility of what's going to happen if they don't give you what you want. Because to consider, and then she pauses and says, I say that a lot as a joke, because if you start to consider the people who are player and audience facing, and who have to deal with mitigating harm and keeping the sentiment around their game positive, there's a genuine value you can impress upon them, both ethically and financially. You can say this is important. So she says that. It is worth keeping in mind, too, that there's also an Anita Sarkeesian tweet that was from 2019, another progressive games consultant, Anita Sarkeesian, with Feminist Frequency. And in 2019, she tweeted something very interesting out about CD Projekt Red, a Polish game development studio. She said, "Hey CD Projekt Red, I'm always available for consulting because it sure sounds like you might need it before the whole internet drags you for what sounds like some potentially sexist representations, which we all know you've struggled with in the past." Now, a bunch of different news articles have written about this story since, but almost all of them with a basically almost all of them, except for the shortcut. Um, in the English language press, at least, there's some German and Spanish articles I've not read. Almost all of them, including Kotaku, The Gamer, PC Gamer, Eurogamer, Aftermath, The Mary Sue, The Guardian, and Media Matters. All of these sites have written about this controversy, and not one of them mentions how it started, which was the Sweet Baby Inc. attacking the attacking Cabrutus and trying to get him banned from Steam under false pretenses, or get the Steam group censored. None of them mention this at all. In fact, the PC Gamer article, they do mention very briefly. They say that Sweet Baby Inc. employees mentioned the group on Twitter. They mentioned it on Twitter. That's the only context they provide. Not that they were encouraging their followers to mass flag them and get them banned. Other articles as well, like the Guardian's article and at least one or two others, also talk about Gamergate in their articles. They do not actually represent Gamergate at all fairly, and they try to attack it and basically say that they were the Guardian article that Gamergate hated LGBTQ people. I'm not sure where they're getting this idea from, but that's just something they just made up and ran with, I guess. And
That's a narrative from 2008, and that so it shows you how little things have changed. Because this is exactly because I think what happened, and yeah, the 2008 and now are related in that again a lot of that GG back in the day was, the original one was just, hey, we want journalists to stop being corrupt pieces of shit, really. That was really all we wanted. It's like, hey, can we get a little bit of objectivity? And they just went absolutely, rabid in attacking us. And it's the same thing, because I think not back in the day, we naively we ended up opening Pandora's box because we kind of pointed out, hey, the media is corrupt. Now, I'm not taking political sides on this. I will put it out there. My side is all journalists are corrupt. I don't, apart from a few notable exceptions, they're all corrupt. So I don't want people to misconstrue this as a partisan thing. I'm like, no, I hate both sides. And we really are just kind of seeing this again. And lying by omission is still lying, right? So you've got these articles saying, it out of nowhere, this totally happened. They're attacking Sweet Baby for absolutely no reason, or because they happen to mention one of their employees mentioned something on Twitter. Yeah, just take our word for it. And let's say at this point, so many people are not trusting what they say.
yes, it is. It is quite interesting, especially since we do now. It is believed because the Side Scrollers podcast, they've talked with rather. They've interviewed Cabrutus, and they've also talked with and showed the screenshots from someone else named Cod. Now, this Cod person is a member of the Sweet Baby Inc. Discord, which Alyssa Mercante, the Kotaku writer, interviewed. She interviewed this guy and a couple other people, but she doesn't include anything from his interview for some reason in her article. And in their conversation where she talked with him, he specifically provides her with evidence that this started because of them being harassed, of the Steam group and Cabrutus being harassed by these two Sweet Baby Inc. employees, Maya Felix Kramer and a gentleman named Chris. I can pull up his last name. Give me 1 second. Sorry.
Hmm. Oh yeah, and then you've also, as subsequent to that, what the Sweet Baby Discord, Sweet Baby Detected Discord, Steam group had is they then subsequently, I'm actually hats off to Val for actually moderating properly, in that suddenly, out of nowhere, all these really nasty, very evil looking posts turned up on the Sweet Baby Inc. Detected curator group. Now, I will point out, Felix Kramer has a history from back in the day of doing this. They will create sock puppet accounts. They will go in, they will post horrible, nasty crap on a forum, and then they will log into their other account and immediately start reporting it, trying to get the forum banned. This is an old tactic. we've again they in some respects this mob haven't evolved. They're doing the same stuff they did last time.
So do you
Um,
have evidence of Maya Felix Kramer doing this in the past? If so, please send it to me. It doesn't have to be right now, but at some point.
yeah, there is evidence of that. It's yeah it.
I
I'll
know of the
yeah.
TFYC situation where um, her and Zoe Quinn got into a massive fight with the fine young capitalist Matthew Rappard,
Yeah.
another competing game jam that was competing with Zoe
Oh,
Quinn's
yeah, but
organization.
this is the thing. Unfortunately, with that lot, it's very hard to get sort of direct evidence. I mean, you had Brianna Wu who got caught out doing it because she forgot to change accounts. She was
Well,
posting all
she's
this
done that.
horrible stuff.
Well, she's done that twice. The
Yeah,
Steam incident, which
yeah,
her story is that she doesn't say that she forgot to log out. She says she's been asked about this by Stardust in an interview. She
yeah. I was
says
hacked. Yeah, blah blah blah.
she's no. Actually,
Yeah, yeah.
she says that she wanted to guide all of the harassment to go to one place. That's why she made the bait post because she wanted to send everybody there and have it all go to one place. She also claimed that there were hundreds of mean messages that
Mm,
criticized her game and or herself, which
mm-hmm.
whatever. I consider that to be fair game if
Yeah.
it's criticism. Um, on in the comment section or the forums. She didn't specify which. I've looked at archives of both the comment section and the forums for the Steam forums for Brianna Wu, and I can't find these hundreds of mean
No.
messages. Though there is some indication, maybe a couple of posters mentioned that a couple posts did get deleted, so it's possible that there were one or two mean messages that did criticize her or her game, and that she did
Okay.
remove those.
Yeah. Here's the thing, right? This going back into the before times of the internet.
But
This
then she also
these
had the sock. She did have a sock puppet though at the Bro Lols troll account
Yeah, yeah.
that she used
So
in
hang on,
September
yeah,
2014. But
but
that's
this
separate.
goes, yeah, but this goes back even before, way before GG. So we're going back, early 2000. Quinn, but Felix, Lego Butts, all that crowd, they were all goons on the old Something Awful forums, and they were all members of a group called Helldump. Helldump, this is where these tactics were developed and honed. These people have a long history of being horribly abusive, of doing this sock puppeting thing, and they know how not to get caught because they have been doing it for a very long time. Right? So if you go and look in the history of Helldump for Something Awful, they were all there. And again, so many of the people who are now considered progressive were part of this. Like again, you even look at like YouTubers like H Bomber Guy. No, he was one of the original goons, and you've got people who go, oh no, we've got receipts as to these people were abusive back in the day. It just seems that they've now found a way to be socially acceptable bullies, right? They found a way to bully people in a way that's socially acceptable.
So
But yeah.
I know it's confirmed that Zoe Quinn was a goon. She admits to having a crippling hell dump addiction on Twitter,
Mm-hmm.
and that she misses the board. Um, but I don't. Do we have specific proof that someone like Maya Felix Kramer or H Bomber Guy that these people were goons? I mean, I know that it's common that a lot of people were back then. Something Awful was a big
Well,
community, and not everybody
literally,
there is
yeah,
like a harasser, of
yeah.
course.
Yeah. Actually, funnily enough, anyone who's familiar with Mr. Medica, he literally just did a stream yesterday or the day before, where he was going on about that because he was remember, he openly admits like, yeah, I was on that forum back in the day and I was an asshole, but he hasn't then gone what we go full trolls remorse where he's completely flipped over to being oh no, I'm he I'm trying to atone. But he actually, as part of his stream, went through the whole history of it. I'll see if I'll clip it for you and I'll send it to you. But
Yeah,
he was talking
I
about
saw
that
he did the
whole
stream. I
history.
caught part of the
Yeah,
beginning. I've not seen the full thing
yeah.
yet. So
No, he's in there because he talks about that whole history, right? Because he's got receipts. So again, if you can somehow reach out to Medica, I'm sure. And but the problem is, in a lot of cases, these sites were hosted by individuals who had full control over them, who've since deleted that thing, that stuff entirely off the net. So it's very hard to get sort of a original sources sort of thing. While a lot of stuff gets archived, a lot of this stuff was done back in the day before archiving was a thing, and before Google, before Wayback Machine. So it's kind of
well, it
hard.
was during
Yeah.
Wayback Machine, but Wayback Machine is usually very, very slow to archive stuff, and
Well, no,
Something Awful
yeah.
was a members-only community. You had
Yeah,
to pay $10
and
to access it.
that, and you have somehow some people have had pull, or they've had lawyers go to Wayback Machine and have had stuff deleted. I know Quinn has. Right, there was stuff that was on Wayback Machine and was on those archive sites back in the day, that then subsequently disappeared for some reason, and we never, when those sites were queried, we never got an official answer as to why. But the operating theory in the community is that either they knew people there, or they've unleashed the lawyers, right? And the lawyers have sent a nasty letter, and Wayback Machine has capitulated. So, but again, that's the problem. A lot of this stuff, it's very hard to prove, on that level. And, the people who operate in these spheres, they know. They said they've been doing this for, what are we now? God, nearly 20 plus years, right? They've got very good at it.
All right, so these consulting firms, I don't know, there's so many places we could start with this.
Well,
But
funnily enough, with the Sweet Baby stuff, I actually want to bring up something Short Fat Hataku figured out in his research. So the Sweet Baby stuff comes from there's a company that funds it. I think it's called Baby Ghosts. I think I'll have to look it up. He and Arch Warhammer were discussing it on one of their streams, in that Zoe Quinn a few years ago falsely accused a game developer of sexual assault.
yeah, Alcaloka.
So Alcaloka, and he was in a fragile mental state, and the stress was too much for him, and
And he got
sadly,
fired too, right before he.
right. So he got his life destroyed, and unfortunately, he decided to remove himself from life, which is very tragic. Now, his sister, because he had that game, Night in the Woods. Night in the Woods was reasonably successful. It's made anywhere between about $5 and $7 million. His sister inherited that game company and that money. She then used that money to start Baby Ghosts, which then has helped, provided the seed capital to get Sweet Baby up and running. So there's a whole web. So it's really just sad and horribly perverse in some respects that money is now being used to sort of push this stuff based on that tragic event. And I was following that event at the time, and his sister really sort of threw her own brother under the bus, right? Which was really just horrible.
What is the best evidence that she threw her brother under the bus? I've seen some of the comments that she made. I don't know if I've seen everything that she's ever said about the topic. I know that she basically wanted everybody to move on very quickly and not really talk about it.
Well,
I know
she
that.
actively friends and associating with people who were saying, "Oh, he totally did it," right? And this is the thing: if I had a family member who died under those tragic circumstances, and there was no evidence of that he did what he did, I wouldn't then go and associate with the people who went, "Oh yeah, we totally believe that he did it," and helped more or less drive him to that, drive him to take his own life. Right? This is the thing. Like I have other problems with the likes of what are they calling themselves these days? Stephanie Sterling, Jim Sterling before he decided to transition. When Total Biscuit died, right? And got guys like Jesse Cox. So when, for those who don't know, Total Biscuit was a, game reviewer, well, I'm not going to call him game reviewer, he was a game YouTuber, and he was genuinely liked within the community. Again, we all had a lot of respect for him. Sadly, he ended up being diagnosed with bowel cancer and passing away. Well, when he passed away, you had a lot of the progressive games journalists dancing on his grave. Because back in the day, he refused to take a side in the original GG. He just went, he even just him being neutral, right? Got him the all that hate. And so when he passed away, they were dancing on his grave. And you still had people who professed to actually be really good friends with him, like Jesse Cox, like Stephanie Sterling, aka Jim Sterling, who were actively hanging around with people like that. And I'm like, well, do you not have any sort of moral compass? This is the thing. It really just sort of spoke to their character. It's like, oh, you've got people who are, saying some horrific things. Oh, well, we're glad he's dead, type stuff about someone you profess to be close to, and you're still actively associated and working with them. It's kind of sad.
So I don't know. None of us know, I guess, how this is going to
Mm.
play out. Obviously, the people who wrote these articles that were untrue or that left out very important facts, including the
Mm.
inciting incident, there probably have to be some kind of consequences. And it might depend on like if they actively knew what they were doing was bad, or if there's good reasons to think that they did, then they probably should be terminated. If they were just super lazy, that I don't know what their internal structure would be, but obviously they should probably face some sort of reprimand and maybe even termination too, given how badly they botched this, depending on what all they wrote in their articles. But there
Okay,
obviously has,
so
and there had to be obviously retractions and apologies issued, and
mhm.
the people who, the Sweet Baby Inc., who harassed Cabrutus and the Steam group, they should one apologize and two probably be terminated for their actions as well.
Yeah, in a just and fair world, I would agree with you, but in reality, no, that's not going to happen. There's an old line back from World War One. It's like, at what point does stupidity end and criminality to begin? Well, again, what they're, technically lying by omission is not punishable, right? You see this in all sorts of media. It's all about how you spin it. So again, there was much more egregious stuff back in the old GG days, and nothing happened to them. There was no retractions, there was no apologies, because don't forget, these writers, they have editors. There's a whole chain of command that looks at these articles and then goes, yep, that's good to publish, and publishes it, right? So the only time you ever see this mob being punished is when they go after people with enough money that they can release the lawyers. And to be honest, most, smaller people don't have that, right? And or if they do, they can sort of go and talk to a lawyer, and a lawyer will give them like, yes, you have a case, yes, you're probably morally correct. However, in reality, this is what it's going to cost you in terms of money and time and everything else to deal with this. Are you sure you want to? Right? Because again, a lot of cases, it's a Pyrrhic victory. Like, yeah, you might be able to take them to court, have them, do a retraction or whatever else. It's going to cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars if you're lucky, at the low end in legal fees, right? This is a lot of the frustration of we've seen is these people aren't being held to account. The only thing, to be honest, consumers can do is don't give them clicks, don't give them attention, and starve the beast. Because as we've seen, there are so many of these companies that were sort of existing back in the day have gone bankrupt because people just stopped listening to them. Right? Again, go and don't give time, money, or attention to people who hate you. That is pretty much the only thing we can do. They're clearly being supported by various other financial backers who have bigger wallets than us. Okay, then. All we can sort of do is say, well, these sites, no one reads them, no one gives them any attention. Marketing companies don't bother advertising with them because we don't listen to anything they say. And in fact, if they say something, we're probably going to go and do the opposite. So if you're advertising with them and they say, hey, buy our product, we're going to yeah, no, we're not touching that product because of the people you're choosing to associate. That's, as consumers and the little people, that's pretty much all we can do. And it can be a little frustrating because it does, that sort of action doesn't have immediate results. But on a longer timescale, you look at what happened back in the old, the original GG days and what happens now. Well, we're still around and they're not, right? How many of these outlets have we seen go, bankrupt? So for like the likes of Vice, who were very anti-GG back in the day. Well, they don't exist. Kotaku's gone bankrupt a few times. I imagine they're probably going to go under again soon because no one listens to them. So many of these outlets are just sort of zombieing along at this point. So yeah, all we can do is we don't listen to them. We don't listen to people who hate the customer base, who aren't going to respect us. And the thing is, I'm not looking for the opposite, and we're not looking for these ones to just, openly, absolutely pander to us. There's a middle ground, right? And that's what we can, hope to get. But while they keep doing this, we can just ignore them and go off and do something else. Right? There's plenty of great games out there, as we've seen. You've got games like Pal World, you've got games like Helldivers 2, you've got they're just two the most obvious examples of small teams creating a product because they love it and they have respect for the audience and they just want to make something fun. And, the gaming community has proven the money is out there. Like, you make something like that, we will throw money at it, we will support it, we will get behind it, we will, embrace it. Whereas you see things like, just going back to the Sweet Baby Inc., we have to make it very clear to these companies, taking out the whole, diversity thing and everything else, you are hiring these people to do narrative and writing. They suck at it. So we are not, if we see them, and this is what this group, this Sweet Baby Inc. detected is, it's a pattern, right? Because funnily enough, 4chan, the guys over on V do their own awards show every year. And that literally just aired, was it yesterday? And this was all done and dusted, and the voting was all done before any of this Sweet Baby Inc. stuff started. And funnily enough, one of the awards they have is worst writing in video games. All but one of the games had Sweet Baby involved. So taking out the progressive politics or anything, it's like, the likes of Sweet Baby, they suck at their job. Stop hiring them. Right? Because if we see that you've been working with them, that is going to tell us the writing in this game is more than likely going to suck based on their track record. So we're either not going to buy your game or we're just going to hold off and see. I mean, it might be that Sweet Baby completely changes their staff and suddenly they get really good writers. Admittedly, pigs will fly probably at that point. But, the communities, would be open-minded. If suddenly they worked with it and had a game that had really good writing, then people will turn around. But as it is, it's a track record. It's like, nope, if that company and these narrative companies are involved with these games, because there's more than one, it is a pattern. Yep, if those narrative companies are involved, this game will suck. So we are going to take our money and go somewhere else. And that is actually going to become even more powerful because given current economic trends, people don't have a lot of spare income at the moment. Or, there's so many other ways to spend our time. Like I said, so many of us with the whole GG thing and everything else just went, okay, well, gaming's going to suck for a while. We're going to go and pick up all those hobbies that we've been meaning to do. I mean, I ended up started gold prospecting and going camping, going out more. We've had other guys, one guy took up, I want to learn how to ride a motorcycle. So he's done that. People have just picked up other hobbies and companies need to realize, I think, from a business point of view, you aren't competing for people's money anymore. You are competing for people's time. So if you want us to spend time on your product and thus money, you are going to have to make it worth our effort. Right? We're going to have to want to enjoy this, not playing a product with narrative that's telling, you're a horrible, horrible person, rah, rah, rah. Here's a Mary Sue type character who you absolutely love. You have to absolutely love, despite being a terrible person. Forspoken, I'm looking at you. People just aren't going to do it. Like, no, I've got other things to do.
All right, so you said that they don't do a good job. Some of the games that they have worked on have been well received. Some of them have not.
Hang on. Now, well received. Let's qualify that statement. My first question is, well received by who? Right? And this is the thing. Yeah, it's been well received, and then you look at who's actually doing the well receiving. It's the same people who are protecting Sweet Baby. So we've still got this big incestuous problem in that it's being well received by all the usual suspects, all the gaming press and the rest of it go, oh, this is great, because they are doing marketing for the company. They are telling, oh, no, this is well received. The critics all love it. Yeah, but the consumer base gets it and hates it. So, for example, let's look at Suicide Squad, right? On release, you had all the gaming outlets absolutely singing its praises. But then you look at the things like the Steam stats. People bought it the first week. And you see this in movies as well. What you do is you look at how the numbers are after a week. So what will happen is you'll get all the people who originally buy it. And then what will happen is word of mouth will get out amongst the gaming community. Right? Going, actually, this is good, or no, it's crap. and then what you see happen is the numbers just drop off a cliff. Right, so the well-received thing I always take with a big grain of salt, because it's really, you look at people who are singing, look at who's singing its praises, and in this regard, there's a very, 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 very big overlap between the people singing its praises and the people defending Sweet Baby.
Well, so let's just look at Metacritic. Well, so I should say some of these games, they run the gamut. If you look at their games lists, the games that they've worked on that are publicly available on the Sweet Baby Inc. Detected page, some of them are positive reviews mostly. Some of them are negative reviews mostly. So like Gotham Knights, quite horrible. Metacritic too, quite horrible. Both user and Metascore. 5.2 user score, 67 meta for Gotham Knights. But others are a bit more received. Like Alan Wake 2, for instance. Alan Wake 2 has an 8.7 user score on Metacritic, and an 89 Metascore. Like that's pretty good.
Yeah, and again, it's not. This is the thing. It's not always going to be well. If they were involved, it's always going to suck. But it's a strong indicator, right? So Alan Wake, I would say they're probably involved, but they were probably involved to not a huge degree, because I think Alan Wake stuff that would have been basically, I think when they were more starting out, so they may have had a small hand in it. But and then the thing is, at the end of the day, all we can do. And this is what I advocate for, is people should have enough information to make their own informed decision, right? So if people go, oh well, Sweet Baby's involved, but Alan Wake, we like the writing, fine, it's going to do well, right? If that's the case, people can make that decision, right? But there seems to be, I mean, you're looking at that data trend, you look at, okay, so if we look at all the games that Sweet Baby are involved with, how many of them were rated good and how many of them were rated bad?
Well, we can do that right now, since I've got.
Yeah.
Obviously, this is only the works that are publicly known. On the Steam Curator.
Yeah.
But do you want me to quickly go through some of them real quick? The user scores only, and then we'll talk about.
Yeah, go through the user. Yeah, basically go through the user scores.
Now, to be clear, some of these only have like one's 29 user ratings. That might not be enough to necessarily give.
Yeah, what's that? We're taking. Yeah, this is by no means scientific. It is a
And they could be different from platform to platform. For instance.
And be aware that again, these things can be gamed, right? We have seen that in IMDb. You do see that where they will hire third parties to game these, especially around release, to try and sort of drum up the hype. Right, but then over time, you'll see the scores will correct to being more. Once the marketing campaign ends, the scores will drift back to what you'd more expect. But let's go.
Okay, so NeoCab, 6.4 user rating out of 29 reviews. Alan Wake 2, 2,182 reviews, 8.7 user rating. Gotham Knights, 5.2. Assassin's Creed Valhalla, 7.1. Shadow Gambit, 7.4. Dungeons & Dragons Dark Alliance, 3.3. Kingdom 80s, only 5 user reviews, mind you, 7.4. Sable, 125 reviews, 6.8. And Goodbye Volcano High, based on 16 reviews, 6.6.
So again, you're looking at the average. They're averaging between about 6 and 7, right?
Yeah, about, yeah.
So
with the exception, Alan Wake's the only one that breaks out of 7.
Yeah, right. So, but again, people can say, okay, well, they're going to be just slightly above average at best, right? So if you look at, again, if you're a gambling man or gambling person, you can look at it and going, yeah, the odds of it being above a 7 are pretty low, right? They've had one, and so if people want to spend money on it, great. It's I'm not gonna tell people, oh, definitely don't buy this. It's like, well, no, it's your money. If you want to spend it on those games, great, go for it. But you can have other people going, well, it's entirely personal preference. So you may have people going, look, people may play those games, may be fine with the kind of politics and representation that gets pushed in them. The other ones are people going, you know what, I want to avoid that stuff because I just, disagree with it for whatever reason. It comes down to informed consumer choice. And the thing is, that has always been, a position for people who were supporting GG, even back in the day and even now. A lot of it's a consumer movement. We want to be informed about where, how we spend our money, and there's nothing wrong with more information. So the fact that you've got the likes of Sweet Baby, etc., trying to suppress and delete curator groups like this is very anti-consumer. Oh, well, no, you're not allowed to sort of say, we're involved in these games, because that's information that we do not want out in the public, even though it's on your bloody website. So it's just interesting that they take that stance. Oh, no, we want, businesses and potential clients to see who we've been involved in because we want clout. But when you've got consumers saying, well, here's a list of games they've worked on, no, we don't want that. Consumers, delete that curation group. Right, so it's very hypocritical in that regard.
So, why do you think, and obviously you can't read their minds, but why do you think that they wanted to get the group deleted? Because you'd think if they're proud of their work, they'd be like, yeah, absolutely, we worked on those games, we did a good job.
Yeah, funny that.
Hmm.
Because again, I think they know what the community opinion of them is, and you see this, and again, it's not just games, but all sorts of media. We've seen that people overwhelmingly do not want this particular, brand of politics shoved down their throat, right? Because again, you see this meme of, oh, well, you don't want politics in games. No, politics in games is done fine if it's done well and it's done, with nuance and good writing, right? Because I can think of a number of games that have politics in them. Again, BioShock being one of them. That if done well and done, written well, people don't mind. It's an interesting, in a lot of cases, it can be an interesting examination of said politics. But in these cases, it very rarely is, and it's usually shoved down. You're going, no, you have to. Here's the good guy, and here is the bad guy, evil, bad guy, McPuppy Strangler, who happens to look suspiciously like an American presidential candidate. Straight of orange type thing. You have to hate this person, and and a lot of things. So going back to another step, I've got a friend of mine who's only recently got into anime, and one of the things he was complaining about was just how bad modern Western media was, whether it be movies or TV shows, because the writing, because he's a writer himself, he's like, I'm bored because it's, oh, well, here's, Mary Sue, or here's, Morty Stew, or here's the good guy and here's the bad. It's really just, there's no nuance, there's no areas of grey, there's no subtlety. I'm bored. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, here, what things do you like, right? So what types of genres do you like? And I said, okay, well, you like sort of sci-fi, cyberpunk, spy type stuff. Well, like, here's Ghost in the Shell, right? And he'd seen the movie back in the day, but he hadn't seen the series. I'm like, okay, well, here's Ghost in the Shell standalone complex. And he was hooked. And so he's discovered, it's like, wait, and this is the same reason I ended up getting back into it back in the day, like we're talking early 2000s, was I had the same thing. I'm like, I am bored with this media. That it's really predictable. I don't care. Like, there's no stakes for the character. I'm like, I know that character's going to survive. There's no threat. I'm bored. And I ended up getting into sort of more of the anime stuff because of, wait, we've got stories where it's not good guy, not clearly good guy versus bad guy. It's, you've got shades of grey. You've got interesting characters and stories. And I genuinely like, I'm engaged. I care about the characters. I think a lot of it is that if you've got characters that, and I think people will see this in movies and stuff. So if you've got characters in movies and you hate the character, or you just like, I really just do not like this character because, for whatever reason, you don't care what happens to them. And thus you don't care about the rest of the story. Because you're just like, no, I don't care what happens to that character. I'm not invested. I'm bored. Go away. Right, so this seems to be a problem in Western media, whether it be gaming or movies or whatever else, where people are just going, I don't care about the characters because they're just fundamentally unlikable. And so, you're seeing that with a lot of this stuff where it's like, well, Sweet Baby and these other ones, they're just really bad at writing characters. And you get the likes, for example, and the thing is also you're getting really good writers getting chased out of the industry. Amy Henning being a classic example. So, do you know the story of Amy Henning?
Oh, sorry, I was muted. No, I do not. If you want to
No.
explain it real quick.
Okay. Okay, so Last of Us Part 1 was written by Amy Hennig, right? So everyone was, you realize how much people liked that story, right? Last of Us Part 1, we talk about ones that were overwhelmingly critically positive. Like, everyone liked the story, it was, people loved the game. Then you had Neil Druckmann, who chased out Amy Hennig. Now, Amy Hennig has written so many stories for iconic games. She did old school Mass Effect. She's done stuff for Halo. She's done stuff. She did the original Last of Us. She did the series, the vampire series, Legacy of Kain. That's it. And one of the things with Legacy of Kain is when they weren't going to make the last game, she sort of asked, "Oh, well, can I release a book so we can finish off the story?" And the studios kind of screwed her over. But with Last of Us Part 2, Neil Druckmann chased her out of Naughty Dog. Right, you look at Amy Hennig's writing credits. Some of the most iconic narrative, games that everyone raves about the narrative, she wrote. Right. Well, then you look at the likes of Neil Druckmann, who chased her out, and then what they did to Last of Us Part 2, and Last of Us Part 2 has just become a meme joke at this point, because of what happened with that, that narrative. And she's more or less, Amy Hennig sort of more or less dropped out of the industry because she's been chased out by a lot of, and funnily enough, there is an overlap between these sort of progressive writers and the likes of Amy Hennig, who are actually good, right? There seems to be there's a lot of jealousy in that, with people going on, well, we want diverse stories where you've got, black characters, gay characters, characters of color, right? You could have that, and you can still have good writing. The two aren't mutually exclusive, right? There are some fantastic ones out there where you've got characters like that, and the story is well written. Versus now where it's, it's more or less done by committee, it's done by tick box, and the writing is terrible, so people don't care.
So you say that Western media, that they seem like they're incapable of writing complex characters. This there may be a decline in quality. I would not be willing to. I would
No, no,
not immediately dismiss that, but
yeah.
there are some examples of films or TV shows, I guess, that have come out in recent years that do have like some
Oh
pretty
yeah, yeah,
complex, like
yeah.
Game of Thrones or The Expanse or
Okay, so
Andor.
yeah, but Game of Thrones. But again, the thing is, Game of Thrones was written before. Like, if you look at it was written that
Two of those
a
are
lot
based
of
on
this.
books, so
Yeah, yeah. But the thing is, our inflection point is a lot of the stuff that was written prior to about 2014, 2016. That's when it really seems to sort of inflect, and when the rot really started coming in. So Game of Thrones was written, the books were written before that, right? And another thing you see, there has been some. I'm trying to think of a couple of examples off the top of my head, but recently you've had some series that season 1 was great, everyone loved it. Season 2 falls off a cliff, and what usually happens, and the pattern that we've noticed is, it's a project that sort of flies under the radar in terms of production, right? And the thing is, a lot of these, and I'm just going to use the shorthand woke people. There's a lot of them. There seems to be a huge overlap with them. A lot of them have a very large narcissistic streak. Again, that cringe stuff that came out about Anita Sarkeesian this week, with her having a wedding themed party. I've
oh,
always
I
contended.
haven't seen this.
Okay, have you seen this where basically a woman marries herself?
I've never heard of this tradition. No.
Oh, my boy, I have to send you some. There is a. Okay, my professional background, just a bit of a sidetrack. My professional background is in project management and business analysis. And one of the things you have to learn with this is people, and how people work, how people interact. And there's a fantastic book I've got called Working with Monsters. It's written by an Australian criminal profiler, and it talks about how to spot dysfunctional people in the workplace. And when I say dysfunctional, I'm talking people who are what they call cluster B personality disorders. So cluster B personality disorders is psychopaths, histrionic, chronic crippling attention seekers. So it's cluster B personality disorder, which is every psychotic, bunny boiler girlfriend you've ever heard of. And narcissists. And I'm not just saying people who are a little bit self-centered. I'm talking people who are clinical grade narcissists. And Anita Sarkeesian, in my opinion, is one of those narcissistic types. She literally had a party where she got to be the bride. There was no groom. It was a wedding themed party, and she got to have her princess day. And I think this was a lot of what happened with Gigi as well, is she got this wonderful narcissistic feed. He just got a drip of pure narcissism directed to the main vein. He got that narcissistic supply, and she was loving it.
Yeah, I'm not the world's biggest fan of Anita Sarkeesian. I've
Yeah,
spoken about her work a bit, I guess, in this
yeah.
projecting. But
But the
like,
thing
I
is,
don't
yeah,
care if she wants to host like weird parties
oh
like this
no,
about
again,
herself. Yeah.
it is, you know, I said she can do what she likes as long as you're not breaking the law or hurting anyone. I don't care. But it is very indicative, and it's the same with Neil Druckmann, right? Again, I contend that Neil Druckmann's another one where he shows all the hallmarks of being a very narcissistic person, and narcissistic people will destroy pretty much anything they touch, right? So you look at Last of Us Part 2. It was funny in the last month or so when there was the TV awards, because Last of Us got made into a TV series, and Druckmann turned up on the red carpet and no one knew who he was. That was kind of funny.
So narcissistic people.
Mm.
You said earlier you don't want to talk about you don't want to say their names, the literally who people.
Mm-hmm.
But you did also mention you mentioned the literally who people, and you mentioned Short Fat Otaku. I'm actually having a conversation. I'm not sure if you saw, with Short Fat Otaku, Brianna Wu, and Carl the Pagan,
Mm-hmm.
with Wick as the moderator.
Mm.
This is happening on Tuesday to discuss the Sweet Baby Inc. discussion, the
Mm.
controversy.
Mm.
Is there? Well, first off, what do you think of this? This is not something that happened during GamerGate, really, where this time people who disagree with each other very strongly, high profile people, Brianna Wu and
Mm.
Carl the
Mm.
Pagan, are both original
Mm.
OG anti-Gamergaters, and then you have Short
Mm-hmm.
Fat Otaku and myself.
Yep. Yeah. Yep.
They're coming together. They're saying, "Hey, look, I think we need to have a
Mm-hmm.
public conversation about this topic, and
Mm-hmm.
hopefully have a productive discussion that moves the gaming industry forward." What do you think of
Mm-hmm.
this meeting of the minds?
I contend that from her past behaviour, Wu's coming in with bad faith. Um, and as much as again, as much as I can see, you know, the lights of SFO and yourself coming in with, you know, with all the best intentions, um, I don't particularly see anything positive coming out of it, because again, Wu has a long history of doing this stuff in bad faith, and again, I'm personally of the opinion that she's kind of another one that she really likes the attention, right? So this is the thing. She literally, I think she tweeted this week going, "Oh, fixing exactly what it was, but you know, people need to not get involved in this. Rah, 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 you know, just go and do something else." And you know, just she hasn't been mentioned in any of the Sweet Baby, but she's now inserting herself back into it, right?
Hey,
Which,
I
yeah,
will defend her on this actually, because I'm
mm,
part of the organizing of this discussion. I don't know about her.
yeah,
I saw her tweet too,
yeah, yeah, yeah. And again,
but like I
this is
will
all
say,
personal opinion. Oh,
she's
yeah.
not inserting herself in this necessarily, because Carl the Pagan, he worked for Activision Blizzard, and now he's like a
Mm,
YouTuber and talks about nuclear energy. He
mm,
he reached out to me, and
mm,
was like, "Hey, look, Wick's wanting to do this show. Do you want on?" And I
mm,
said, "Yeah, sure." And he said that Brianna Wu and Short Fat Otaku would probably be there, and I talked with Wick about it. So this was organized by other people. I don't know if she floated the idea to Carl, but I've not heard that to be the case.
Well, here's the thing, right? You look at what she said back in the day with the original GG and how horrible and how traumatic it was, etc., etc. She always had the option to say no. She had the option to say, "Look, you know, I appreciate the offer, but I don't want to get back into this. You know, I've got a lot of bad feelings about it. What happened last time? Thanks, but no thanks." Right? Um, but and you're seeing on Twitter and the rest of it, she's jumping back into it again. Right? So, oh look, I want to be wrong. Don't get, you know, I hope something productive does come of it. I'm not going to sit, you know, but I'm a pessimist at heart, and the thing is about us pessimists is we want to be wrong, but we usually aren't. That's the sad thing. So look, I said, if something productive comes of it, great. My expectations are low, put it that way, and I'm
Well,
happy to be
I'll
I'm
say
happy to be
this:
pleasantly surprised.
I'm prepared for, or at least I'd like to think I'm prepared for, and getting prepared for, a conversation that could go any number of different directions. But I
Yeah,
hope it's
and
a
the
good
thing is,
faith discussion, and I hope that
yeah,
it could be the first of many, perhaps. Where I also want
yeah,
to hopefully set up a
yeah,
GamerGate discussion with perhaps
yeah,
the same
and
people.
yeah, and the thing is, if you and SFO go in with, you know, take the high road. My advice to you both is go in with your noble intentions, take the high road, but if they start trying to drag you on stuff, don't just go, no, we're not, set boundaries and go, no, here are the terms of engagement. Here's the terms of the discussion that we all agree with, right? Here are the boundaries of the discussion, and not just dictatorial. Say this is what we're going to talk about. It's like, no, here are mutually agreed boundaries. Get it in writing, right? Because this is always my advice. If you're dealing with anyone like this, always get it in writing. Verbal agreements are worth the paper they're written on. So
Yeah.
even if it's an email.
Well, I don't think that's gonna happen. I don't think we're going to have like a verbal. I think we're gonna go there, and we're gonna have the discussion about Sweet Babe Inc. and progressive games consulting.
Mm.
And I think that if things get off the rails and go in different directions, if it appears that people are engaging in dishonest ways, either about historical events or current events, I feel like I can meet them on that battlefield.
Okay, yeah. Just be careful about it because, and that's my advice
But
because I said,
I
yeah,
hope things don't go that way. But we'll see how
yeah,
things go.
I do too. But I said it's better to be prepared and not have to use it, right? But again, my advice is have receipts, have things, have original sources, have receipts, and because then you can say no, that's wrong, and here is original sources, and do journalism as intended. Going no, we have original sources. There is no because you'll get. I said it's. I don't want to go into that because otherwise we'll be here all day. But I said having dealt seen this, it's. I said I want to be wrong, and I hope it goes well. And I hope something productive comes out of it. Yeah, I will be not surprised. I won't be surprised if it turns into a bit of a clown show. Put it that way.
All right, so you talk about the ESG BlackRock connection. What do
Mm.
you consider to be the strongest piece of evidence that the reason these game companies are hiring the woke consultants is because of ESG?
Because they put it on their websites, right? So again, if you actually go and look at their website, so you can look at the likes of um, City Project Red, Sega. I have to go through, and there is a long list of them, and they have on their website, their here is our commitment to ESG, right? Because it's really a function of any of these games companies that are publicly traded. So when I say publicly traded, these are games companies who have shares. You can buy shares of them, right? So that's a publicly traded company. It is unfortunately a side effect of more or less any publicly traded company at this point. You have to have some sort of ESG. I work for a company that is publicly traded, and I, get to see that side of it as well. It's put it this way: it's an agricultural company, and I'm going to leave it at that. And I see that, yeah, they are having to go down this ESG path because it is a prerequisite of so many things now in terms of funding. And I've spoken to various departments about this in terms of management, just getting an understanding of why. And they're like, well, yeah, it's these days it's literally the price of doing business. You have to have some sort of ESG for you to get favorably rated, so you get decent cost of borrowing. These days you have the likes of those really big investment funds going, well, if you don't have ESG, we consider you high risk, and thus the cost of doing business in terms of getting financing and all that sort of stuff gets exponentially more expensive for you. And you have the likes of Larry Fink of BlackRock saying, we are doing this to force a certain type of behavior. He is on record saying that.
So I've
So,
talked
for
with.
example, yeah.
Good.
But again, you had City Project Red, who, even though the company owns most of its own shares by merit of them being publicly traded at all, they have to sort of go down that ESG route. And so, as soon as you see, they did a big ESG announcement, going, oh, I think this was just after Cyberpunk released, or I have to look it up exactly when. But as soon as they did that, then you start seeing the consultants come in. So you have these companies and you have these consultants going, hi, you need to do ESG tick boxing. We can help with that, right? We can help you certify. And so they end up having to do it as part of their business.
I don't disagree that this
Mm,
probably this may play some role. Though I have spoken with a game developer an anonymous game developer who works in the industry, and they have indicated to me that they think the ESG stuff is not really the main cause. They think the main cause is that these people, the woke consultants and woke people in general like this, that they are scared of them, that
Oh
they
yeah, that's so.
that
Again, I'm not
that
saying
these
it's
people are
yeah,
narcissistic. Basically, what you said
yeah,
actually, that they're
yeah.
literally that they're
Mm.
narcissistic people, and that they are manipulative, and that people are
Oh yeah,
afraid of them.
yeah.
That's why
Oh
the
yeah,
companies are hiring. Not so much afraid. They indicated, as I qualified with them, I wanted to get more information,
yeah.
but they say that they're it's not just that they're afraid. It's that it's also just not worth the hassle of dealing with a bunch of
It's
articles
it
or
is it is yeah
online
it is
backlash
yeah
from social justice
it is.
activists.
And the problem is also a lot of the marketing people within those own companies come from the same sort of mindset, right? So in a lot of cases, it's risk management, right? So they're doing the risk calculation, going, well, the risk of us ignoring these people, and they'll have their own marketing people and their own internal people going, oh well, if you don't do this, you're gonna, your game's not gonna sell, your company's gonna get destroyed, and you're gonna end up living in the street in a cardboard box, right? And they really do put the fear into them. And so they kind of do based on their inputs, make the logical decision of, well, we have to go down this route, right? We have to include this, otherwise we're going to get destroyed. And, a lot of the game stuff is, very creative people who are very sensitive to this. Again, I'm married to a creative, I'm friends with a bunch of creatives, and I have seen, a bunch of them just get really, oh, people are going to hate my stuff. And they, these lot really do sort of play on that and manipulate it. It's like the old Monty Python joke, oh, it's a nice army you got there, Colonel. Shame to be something would be happen to it, you know. Someone might set fire to it, or someone might destroy your game studio. But it really does, with the bigger companies, it does seem to be much more pronounced because they're publicly traded. And from a business financial point of view, I'm of the opinion that having a games company and having it publicly traded are mutually exclusive. The funding model really does not work well, and this is why you're seeing so much of the, microtransaction and all this other really predatory stuff. You generally see it in companies that are publicly traded because they've got Wall Street funds, etc., leaning on them, going, no, you have to make more money every quarter. Redline has to go up, right? You have to post more profits every quarter. So you have these companies just being pushed into this model of trying to extract as much money out of the player base for the least amount of effort. So,
All right, so
um,
I want to get us to the GamerGate topics, but one more
mm,
question here,
mm.
which is you say the original GamerGate. I know some people have said, "Oh, is this a possible GamerGate too?" They kind of speculated on that or made jokes about it. Do you see this as potentially becoming probably not that name GamerGate 2, but some sort of similar controversy or GamerGate 2 if you want to call it that. Do
It,
you see
it's
this
it's
becoming that?
here's going to be the thing. It'll be GG2 because the media wants it to be GG2. They never really, GG was the boogeyman that after the first one. To be honest, a lot of us kind of take a little bit of pride in the fact that we still live in their heads rent free. From the first one, we are the boogeyman that lives under the bed for those journalists, sort of thing. And they turn, they hyped us up, to a lot worse than we ever were. Like, no, we're just a bunch of disaffected people who like playing video games who just want, can you stop, paying your mates? And can we just want good games, right? We just want to be able to play good games without you, being corrupt, paying your mates, etc. And the media just absolutely ramped it up and turned us into, the second coming of Genghis Khan sort of thing. So I think you're going to have the media pushing that narrative because it worked so well for them last time. It's oh no the GG harassers are back. Look, the evil people are back. It's again you see this with the various progressive media and the rest of it. It's like, oh well, that person's a Nazi, that person's right wing, etc. Which is all just shorthand for that person bad, we good,
And
right?
some of the
So
articles, like the Guardian article, and as well as at least one or two others,
yeah,
have already tried to bring back
yep,
GamerGate, quote unquote, and
yep.
try and
They've just they're bringing back all the old narratives because they all worked so well last time. Problem is that the world's changed. One of which being, well, you don't have your friends on the Twitter mod team actively suppressing things anymore, right? That's kind of one of the good things that, say what you like about how Elon's running Twitter. you don't have the active media control to the level that we did last time, right? Because now, in hindsight, part of the Elon acquisition, we know that there were people in the Twitter mod team who were actively messing with trends in real time to suppress them and boost stuff that favored their friends, which tend to be the progressive crowd, right? But so yeah, the environment's changed. There's not nearly as many media outlets as there used to be. A lot of them have just either gone bankrupt or they've been taken over by companies who've said, stop doing that because we know people don't want it. So you actually have editorial staff who are preventing this sort of stuff to a point because they know it is poison for the brand. As much as I hate that term, it's apt.
All right. Well, hey, Project Wombat, tell me about your GamerGate experience.
Oh, look, for me, it's been an overwhelmingly positive one. I mean, I've got friends, I'm still friends with people I met back in the original day. And, we still, it really kind of brought the community together because so many of them were sort of, so many of us were isolated in terms of, oh, well, we just want to have good games. We feel like we're being, told that we're terrible people and the rest of it. Oh, here's other people who are like us and just want games. We're not out there to abuse women or anything or do any of this bad stuff they're saying. It's like, no, we're just a bunch of people who want to shitpost, have fun, and not have rainbow head moralists over our shoulders telling us what we should and shouldn't like. Our experience I had, again, in Australia was overwhelmingly great. I mean, we've had at least one marriage come out of it. And I've still got a bunch of friends that we made back in the day, and we're still hang out. We still go out and do things. And really, it's going to be a case of, it kind of shone a light onto the level of media corruption, for lack of a better term, but just the absolute, incestuous nepotism type culture that's within it. And I think that's why the sort of even the mainstream media, again, hate that term, but it's apt, got on and just sort of went completely on the side of the anti-GG crowd because they were, well, if people know, if people start realizing that even the game stuff is corrupt, they're going to start looking at us as well, right? So, that was why you just had the media establishment just completely circle wagons. And I expect we'll see that again, but I think people are sort of a lot more hardened to it and just like, we're doing this again. Okay, cool. And I think a lot of people are just like, well, we're just going to go out, play games with friends, and, we've learnt that we can support the stuff we like, and, we can just go out and enjoy and have fun. We really don't have to worry about it. Like, again, I'm not seeing nearly the level of people getting as terminally online and upset and etc. as they did last time. They're just like, we're doing this again. Right, cool, whatever. It's the usual suspects. And that's the other thing that's going to blow on the mind. I'm sure SFO will bring this up, in that it's literally the same people as last time, right? They haven't changed. They haven't learnt any lessons. They haven't sort of moderated their positions in any way, shape, or form. And going, well, maybe we shouldn't shit on the people who buy our games. Like, nah, we're just going to double down. So look, this is going to run its course. And I think this is just going to be an ongoing, this is a flare-up of an ongoing culture conflict. Again, you can sort of make the analogy. This is GG2 is essentially, there's a historical thing saying that World War II was really just a continuation of World War One. Well, I think this is another one where, we had an armistice for a while, and it's started up again. And so it's going to flare up. I think this is going to be an ongoing thing. You're going to have flare-ups, and you'll have people fighting and whatever else, and then it'll die down again, and then something else will happen to highlight it, and it'll flare up again. So this is just going to be an ongoing thing.
Now, unfortunately, the point you made, and that SFO, you say, is probably going to make, that it's the same people involved, we shouldn't really expect them to do the right thing. That's probably true. But I will say this. I'm not sure if you followed, there was another quote-unquote GamerGate 2 that people were talking about a few months ago. The progressive victory controversy in the United States. Have you followed that?
No, but let me have a quick read.
Okay.
Give me the TLDR. I'll have a look.
So basically, there's a group. Actually, Brianna Wu was involved with them, strangely.
Yeah.
But
Keeps happening.
progressive victory. it's a canvassing group. They try to get live streamers, political live streamers, and content creators
Oh,
to work with
yeah, yeah,
them,
yep.
and then bring them out to canvas and vote in real life, which I think is a
Mhm.
good idea. I support them doing that.
Mhm. Mhm.
Or I support people doing that in general, at least.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Well,
so they
as
hang
a
on. There's a
yeah, just a bit, as a disclosure thing, I actually regularly work as an elections officer in Australian elections. So I've worked multiple federal and state elections. I am all for people voting. Again, I'm not going to tell people who to vote for, but I am all for people voting and that's why I spend time making sure that people get to vote and get to vote how they want, and it's all clean and fair. So, but yeah, continue. Yeah, so
all right.
go
So
on.
the TLDR is that a lot
Mm,
of live streamers and a lot of live streamers and YouTubers are like, hey, look, yeah,
mm,
let's get our people, our audiences out there and get
mm,
them to register people to vote and sign up for
mm,
ballot initiatives and things like this, right?
mm.
So that's great. That's good.
Yeah.
Now, some of them were taking money, regular cash payments, as part of their efforts, like employees, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and they didn't disclose this at first. Now, their initial reaction when people found out about this, their initial reaction, some of them, two of the people involved who were taking the money, was just be like, oh, well, it's not that big of a deal. Screw you guys. You're just haters, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then I talked with some of them, and some other people talked with them, including other GamerGate people like Beckett of Krebs, and a lot of people
Mm-hmm.
were like, this is eerily similar to GamerGate.
Mm-hmm.
But then, strangely, Brianna Wu left the organization,
Mm-hmm.
and the people involved, the streamers and YouTubers, were talking who were taking the money. At least some of them were like, you know what? Actually, I'm sorry. You're right. This actually was a problem. We should have disclosed this. We didn't really think about it because we're not used to working in that way. We're going to do better in the future. I've brought it up in the meetings, and they have actually started disclosing. At least some of them have, like, which I think is
And
like
and
good. They actually did the right thing, and then the controversy went
yeah, yeah,
away.
and yeah, exactly. And yes, funnily enough, you see that happen. Oh, look, you actually do the right thing, and the controversy disappears, right? And again, for stuff like that, you're like, well, hang on. People go, oh, well, you're doing this because you're a political true believer and whatever. Oh, actually, you're being paid. And again, people immediately, as soon as they hear you're being paid and you weren't disclosing it, the suspicion immediately kicks in. Right? Oh, so why are you really doing this? Oh, it's just for money. You don't actually believe in this. You're just doing this for. So, and the thing is, I'm all for political engagement, right? And it was just a case of no, you should disclose it, right? And the thing is, one of the good things we had about the original GG stuff was it kind of got lost in the noise, but there were changes. There were legal changes that went through in terms of policy and the rest of it, saying if you're doing a thing and you're getting paid for it on YouTube and the rest of it, you have to disclose it.
Yep.
So there were changes. And that we were like, you know what, we'll take it. Small victories, but, and that's really all they wanted. Like, hey, if you're shilling something and you're getting paid for it, you should just be disclaiming, hey, I'm getting money to promote this product. That should be just basic, not. And the thing is, we've had controversies like this in Australia prior to even the GG stuff, where you had essentially a controversy where you had in commercial terrestrial radio them doing ads that weren't disclosed as paid ads, right? They happened to be talking about a certain thing in a positive way, and it turns out that they were being paid to do so, but they weren't doing it, they weren't disclosing it, right? And so that got stomped on pretty quick. Once people realised, in terms of the legal side of it. But yeah, that shouldn't be a big reach, right? We're fine. If you're going to push something and you're getting paid for it, just have a disclaimer saying, yeah, by the way, I'm getting paid to do this, right? People respect the hustle. Fine, you're getting paid for it. It's when people feel manipulated that they get very upset, right? Again, politics is, and especially in the US, it's kind of a red team, blue team thing. And it seems to be sort of structurally baked into the US at this point. But yeah, you'll have people going, oh, well, hang on, you're a true believer. Oh, you're really just being paid for this, right? So there is that whole, we're feeling manipulated, right? And thus people will always tend to react negatively to, if they're perceived to be manipulated. So look, that's why the controversy went away. It's like, yep, we screwed up, we're sorry. And you've seen this as well, where people will go, we're genuinely sorry, we screwed up. And did you see the tweet from Grums a couple of weeks ago?
Maybe.
Where he was, okay, so he simply said, okay, if they've apologized, should we accept their apology? And the overwhelming opinion was, unless they show a change in behavior, no. And I put my 2 cents into that as well, in that abusive people, what they will do is they will ask for forgiveness without actually changing their behavior, right? That is what abusive people do, right? Forgiveness without contrition or atonement is meaningless. So again, if a lot of these people actually said, you know what, we're sorry, we're gonna change our behavior and try and do better, and they legitimately look like they're trying to do better, yeah, they're gonna, they may have the occasional slip up, but if they're genuinely trying to do better, people will be very, very forgiving and accommodating, right? Oh, and the people, you'll end up getting probably more respect, because people go, oh, you're actually trying to change your behavior, trying to be better, and great, we will support you. But what people see is, oh, you want to be forgiven, but you're still doing the same shitty thing over and over again. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just like this. It is such a pattern of abusive behavior. You see it in the psychological. If people are familiar with what's called the cycle of abuse, it's an interesting read because it's what dysfunctional abusive people do. Is they will either physically, emotionally abuse you, and oh, look, I'm really sorry, I didn't mean it, I had a bad day, they'll be nice, and they'll be all sweet to you, and then they'll abuse you again, right? And just keeps continuing and keeps continuing. And we're seeing this on a macro level. We're seeing these people be horribly abusive. If they get they called out, or it starts having a negative effect, oh, we're sorry, forgive us, wait for a period of time, oh, they're doing it again. Right, so
yeah, I do think you have to see, yes, an apology, but it does have to be paired with them changing their behavior,
yeah,
and they
exactly,
have
right,
to be
yeah,
entirely upfront about what happened in the past. And I've said that
yeah,
too about other individuals who've done things as well. That
yeah.
you have
So,
to come completely clean about what happened,
mm,
own
yeah,
up to it and apologize, and then demonstrate behavior that's better in the future. And also, if you did spread information that spread widely that wasn't true, or that was greatly exaggerated, I think you have an obligation, a moral obligation to try and correct the record to the best of your ability.
absolutely. But it's very interesting. Funnily enough, if you read up on the psychology of these sort of people, and then when they make the apology, it's always interesting to look at the apology, right? And you look at how it's phrased, right? Because a lot of times you'll see it'll be phrased in that they will never take direct responsibility. I can think of one example, but it's not GG related. So in the UK, there was a controversy that's been going on about a girl who went off and joined ISIS, right? And then she sort of came back, went, oh, look, I'm sorry, I was young, I was stupid, can I come back into the UK, please? And there's been court cases about whether they allow, because they cancelled her passport because she was a dual citizen. They basically went, cancelled her citizenship, cancelled her passport, and said, yeah, don't come back. Well, there was a big court case for her to try and get that revoked. And funnily enough, when you see the interviews of her, one of the phrases that sticks out of me in that interview is, they have no proof I did anything wrong, right? Not, I didn't do anything wrong, because there was rumors of her working with ISIS and doing horrible, horrible things to people while over in Syria. And it wasn't I didn't do anything wrong. It's, the key word is, they have no proof I did anything wrong. So she kind of gave herself away with that, which is sort of implying, yeah, I did stuff. You can't prove it. So you have to let me back in. Right? It's very subtle, but you look at the language when they make their apologies. I'm sorry, people felt upset. Right? As a generalized example. Not, I'm sorry I upset people. I'm sorry people felt upset, which is a Weasley way of not admitting you did anything wrong. It just sucks that people seem to be upset about it. So yeah, it's very telling. And there have been some cases where people have genuinely atoned and changed their behavior, and funnily enough, the community will then welcome with open arms, right? As long as they maintain the good behavior and don't immediately just sort of flip back. The community is very forgiving, because you find a lot of the gaming community is people who have had issues with social functioning. That's why they ended up in gaming, right? Because it was a way of them coping with with their dysfunction, or finding a community where it was very had very well defined rules. It's why you find a lot of people with autism spectrum disorder end up in either tabletop, PC gaming, console gaming, etc. And And we always joke with GG that it was essentially autism versus cluster B. was sort of the big big driver. Is you've essentially got people with autism spectrum disorder on GG, and then you got people with cluster B personality disorder on anti-GG. That was one of the main jokes. But you'll find that they end up with the social functioning. But if people so they're at least sympathetic, so you'll find them very forgiving for genuine contrition and change of behavior.
All right, we do have. Oh God.
No, that's the end of the thought.
We do have about 75 questions to get through, so
yeah, go for it.
All right, let's do it. Why did you get involved with GamerGate?
Because with a lot of frustration in terms of just seeing again the injustice and the way that people were being treated, and this had been a long time coming. We just have seen this bubbling away, and just generally, just getting more and more annoyed with it. And then when GG kicked off, it was just sort of the motivation to go, you know what, bugger it, let's get a bunch of people to meet up and actually, get off the internet and into real life, have a couple of drinks, and just, have a group of people where we can openly discuss this sort of stuff without sort of looking over our shoulder and having, potentially having work, relationships, etc. screwed up by people trying to call our jobs and get us fired. And, we all just sort of more or less got together. Actually, I've got one funny story that does involve a games journalist. I won't name names on his part. So back when we had the original GG, we had a meetup, I think in 2015, because we had PAX Australia running. And we decided, you know what, we're going to have a meetup. And we had an Australian journalist from Kotaku said he wanted to come and meet up. And we're like, that's fine. We have no problem with that. Because it was outdoors in a public place. It was just basically in a park, park around the corner from the PAX venue. And he rocks up. And we could see him playing with his phone, so we know he's recording us, right? And, again, we're all professional. I said pretty much all the members were all, people with white-collar jobs, professionals, etc. And we're having a chat with him. And the thing is, one of the guys, I'll give him a shout-out to him on Twitter, Mr. Bayshiba. Bayshiba physically, he's a big boy, right? He's 6'4" and 2 axe handles across the shoulders. So, funnily, and the thing is, he's a complete teddy bear. Like, guys like him usually are. But yeah, he is a complete chill teddy bear sort of thing. Yeah, the guy rocks up, and you can sort of see he's all puffed up, and he's sort of, I want to say manly, but he's about 5'2", shorter than me. And so he's like, you can see him just sort of really there, just to sort of, antagonistic, I'll say is the word. And then he meets Mr. Bayshiba, and it was funny because he just looks up and up and up, and you can just see him just deflate and just and he was really just polite and well behaved the rest of the time, and just sort of politely excused, like, oh yeah, good, we're good, I'm out. It was always very funny. Just see him just all puffed, and then he meets Mr. Shiba and just suddenly got very well behaved. But yeah, Sheeb has that effect. That's more or less why we got involved. And like I said, we ended up picking up people who were working in the games industry at the time, who just sort of went, rocked up in the metaphorical trench coat and hat, just sort of going, my co-workers can't know I'm here, but I agree with you, and you don't know how bad things really are. And it was very interesting hearing what it was like within the industry.
So these were game developers telling you that they agreed with you?
Yes.
Did the games journalist from Kotaku end up writing an article about you or your group?
Nope, we didn't hear a thing. Because, again, we were very polite. We're like, no, we don't. And the thing is, at the time also, when this was going on, you had a debate in Australia about them changing the rating for games, right? Because we have had issues at the time, there was no R rating for games, right? And you had one particular South Australian senator who was holding up everything, who had a quite puritanical view on things, and just was, oh no, games are only for kids, therefore we don't need a rating for games to deal with adult concepts, right? And that was a thing in Australia. It was like, no, we want to be treated like adults. Gaming, is you can have games for kids and you can have games for adults as well, right? So don't infantilize us. Treat us like adults. And we discussed a lot of that with him, and just our concerns. And very professional. Because again, we knew he was going to be there, and we knew, if we gave him any sort of ammo, he was gonna, we'd see it in print the next day. So, you know, I said everyone was quite aware of, you know, of what was going on, and no, didn't hear a thing.
Well, isn't that quite telling though that they knew that the
Yeah,
GamerGaters weren't terrorists like they wrote, or at least
yeah,
they weren't
but
misogynistic harassers, but then
no,
they didn't write a story about that because maybe he
no,
went in thinking, "Oh, this is a
yeah.
terrorist group. I'm terrified of them," and then
Oh,
he
I'm
realized
going
he
to
was
go in.
wrong,
Yeah,
and then he
no,
just decides not
he
to
was.
write about it.
Yeah, again, I think he was going in there to try and get, you know, to get bait. And it's like, no, we know what. Yeah, I said we know why you're here. Like the fact that you're meeting with us is all. It's like, you know, you're expecting to get quotes and inflammatory stuff. And oh, they're a bunch of evil right wing people. I'm like, well, half the people there were women.
Yeah.
Right. So he's like, well, it's not like women hating because, like, you know, there's a bunch of like women here and they're all very cordial and professional. And again, he just had nothing to work with. It didn't fit the narrative, so he didn't write about it.
All right,
And the
so
thing is,
you're
I don't. Hang on, let me just add one thing to that. The thing is, I don't think he could have written anything positive about it if he genuinely wanted to. I don't think he would have been allowed to. Right? I think that the pressure from his, you know, editors and the rest of it, if he went against the narrative, he'd be looking for a new
well,
job.
if he was an honest
Right?
journalist though, and he knew the truth about a story that his bosses were covering up, he would publish it anyway,
It's
somewhere
not, and
else even.
yeah, but here's the thing: it's not that simple, right? And look, again, in an ideal world, I would agree with you, and in a just world, that was what would happen. However, gaming press is such a small industry, and they all had a universal narrative at that point. If he'd tried to do the right thing, he would have been sacked and he would have been unofficially blacklisted. His name would have been mud, and he would have probably had to completely have changed careers.
He still should have done the
Right?
right thing though. No, I look, I've
I know.
still look. We can blame the
Yeah,
system too, but
yeah.
as an
Like,
individual, he also morally failed.
yeah. And the thing is, yeah, I can say that. But I'm a very pragmatic person. From a practical point of view, it doesn't. Yeah, so I don't agree with what he did, but I can. You know, again, I don't condone what he did, but I can understand the why. Right? When you've got bills to pay, you've got rent to pay, and the rest of it, and you're that terrified that this is the only thing I know how to do, and if I don't do this, I'm going to get blacklisted from the industry. The fear, right, of just I will be broke. Again, it goes the I will end up broke and living in a cardboard box on the street because I have no other way of making money. That is a very powerful motivation for people to sort of, you know, disregard their morals. Right? Again, not agreeing with it, but I can understand the system. And again, it's the system that makes people do terrible things like this. Right?
So the Australian gaming laws. This wasn't a planned topic, but they
Okay.
used to be at least quite awful. Have they gone in a more free speech direction since?
They've got better, and the main thing in Australia is that we have a ratings agency that's basically the Australian media rating. I forget exactly what it's called. Where, you know, again, you talk movies, any sort of media. We have a rating system in Australia, which is like G for general, PA, PG, so parental guidance. So you're looking at early tweens, and then you get MA 16 plus, which is sort of teens, and then you get R, which is adults. For the most part, it's got better. Still, again, there was a bit of a controversy recently with the Coffin of Layla and Andy, where it got temporarily banned off Steam, but that was more of a bureaucratic issue in that they had to go through. They had because it had, admittedly, had adult themes, etc. in it, and so they had to go back and you know rate it, and so it ended up back on Steam, but. For the most part, yeah, it's got better, right? Again, you see the occasional niggling thing where they'll sort of poke at a games company. It's like, oh, well, you've got an in-game thing of morphine. Can you just change that name to something else because we can't glorify drug use? I'm like, well, it's, you know, things like Fallout where they had to change it from morphine to something else. I'm like, well, it's a combat, you know, again, they use morphine in combat for medics, but okay, whatever. No, for the most part, they've pretty much just, it's, you know, it's chilled out. We haven't
So
really seen
the
any
laws,
games banned for stupid reasons.
the laws though do require them to make changes, like sometimes.
Um, it's a negotiation between them and the games company, right? And the thing is, the games company can, you know, they can sort of make a submission. You know, the I don't want to say censors, but the ratings agency and the games company will have a discussion. And again, I think a lot of times they when the games company gives them it in context, they go, okay. So a lot of it is just due diligence, right? So, but we really haven't seen we haven't seen games where they've made major changes to comply with the regulator. It'll be, regulator will say,
But the
hey, we have a
government
problem.
doesn't recognize games as being art and therefore protected under freedom of speech.
Freedom of speech is actually not a thing like it is in the US.
Yes, I'm aware. Australia, they have quite
Yeah,
terrible.
yeah.
Well, do you guys have hate
Well,
speech laws or no?
yes and no, right? Yes, we do, but if you actually read the legislation, it's interesting in terms of there is specifically a line in our legislation, both state and federal, that if it is a provable objective fact, it's not hate speech, right? So that's kind of that is a good thing. We have them, and it's very rare for it to be used, right? You do have people who say quite egregious things, and it's actually quite reasonably enforced on any. So again, if you have, and say, look at the current situation. So if you've got people going, death to all Jews, etc., in terms of the Palestinian stuff, you've got people going, genocide to the Palestinians, where that stuff is actually being enforced. It's just not, I said, people don't tend to see it because it's usually not a quick process, and it's usually done. The courts don't. The courts, it'll get, charges will get laid, and then it'll go through the court system, and that can take anywhere up to 12 months, 2 years.
We don't have to get into this, but personally, I'm of the view that the state shouldn't have the authority to determine for its people what should be orthodox in politics.
Again, you and I can have a big discussion about that because, again, in the US, it really depends, right? There are certain things where in the US, if you're going to take that route, then any discussion, you can have people who are openly and unironically national socialists. Well, hang on, the US has made various laws to determine that is not allowed.
No,
right?
Not at all. You can be a national socialist.
I do remember there was.
You just can't say that you're going to. You can't encourage a mob of people or a group of people to commit acts of violence.
And that
that's the limit.
Yeah. No, I do remember the court case. That's why I had to go and look up the whole why there was a Nazi reference in Blues Brothers. I'm like, what? And actually went and looked up the law. Oh, that's why. Right. So yeah,
Well, they were
for those
prosecuted.
Who don't know,
the Nazis in Skokie were prosecuted, but they won the case. They actually Supreme Court ruled that they do have free speech.
Yeah. So for anyone listening, if you go back and watch the Blues Brothers, that's why there's Nazis in it, because it was a famous free speech case at the time. Look, again, that's a big ass discussion we could have about the limits of speech and the rest of it, whether it is good or bad. Again, I tend towards the American position, but at the same time, that's an interesting and nuanced discussion that's going to go. Yeah. But we got questions,
and that'll be like 6 hours.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. Can you define what GamerGate was?
It was a collection of consumers who were very unhappy with the way that they were being treated by the industry and the games press, who decided to push back and try and exercise their consumer rights. Despite what the media says otherwise, it's like, no, we really just wanted, to be represented fairly, for good or ill, and not have the media, specifically, and game developing companies, paying each other off. Again, this whole thing started with the whole Quinn thing, with her having relationships with various people with massive financial and ethical conflicts of interest. Right, that's what we were mad about, and it just, that was the lightning rod, and then people just started digging. As much as I joke about, a lot of the community having, being on the autism spectrum, a lot of them actually are, and when you sort of give them something like that, they'll dig and dig and dig and dig, and oh look, we've unearthed all this other stuff as well, and it just snowballed from there. So, and again, this is what's happened with this Sweet Baby thing, is people have sort of pulled that thread and just kept pulling and pulling and pulling and gone, oh, look, this is why, so many of the games that we've had lately have been terribly written, stuff that we were genuinely excited about. And, here's a cause. So,
do you consider yourself a gamer? And if so, what does that mean to you?
I don't consider myself a gamer as such, but I've been playing games since I was 14. I'm in sort of 14, 15. I'm my 40s now, so 20, 30 odd years. So I started out in the early days of tabletop. So second ed D&D. That's how old I am. and gone from there. So I won't consider, because again, I consider gamer a horrible marketing term. But I've played games all my life, and I really enjoy them, and I really enjoy, the community that sort of springs up around them. Again, I still run tabletop games for, my friends, and we're all said again, a bunch of guys in our 40s who all started playing in our early teens, and we just enjoy it. So we invite new people to come and play. I said we've run into people, and especially a lot of women, who've gone, oh, I've always been curious about that, but I never really learnt because, again, they were sort of afraid of social judgment at the time. And we've just gone, no, come play with us. It's like, oh, I've never played. No, that's fine. When you be friendly, we'll help you. And, people get into it and they really enjoy it. So, again, I hate the narrative that they're going, oh, well, you're trying to gatekeep people out. No, we're trying to gatekeep bad people out. Right? We're trying to gatekeep out dysfunctional people who want to ruin things for their own amusement. Right? I think there's a type of person who can't be happy. They really just have the inability to enjoy anything, and the only sort of warped joy they get is destroying things for other people. They can't be happy, so no one else can be happy.
Well, this ought to be interesting. I think you might be the only pro GamerGate person, other than like maybe Christina Hoff Summers, who I've interviewed, who answered that they don't consider themselves a gamer. You consider it to be a consumer term, like a term used by marketing
I think
people?
I think it's been coined by marketers, and again, it's become an identity. And I'm like, yeah, again, I don't like, that's not my whole life, right? I said there's a whole heap of stuff. I'm like, yeah, I like games, but I wouldn't consider myself a gamer as such because, I don't like those labels. I'm like, no. Again, it's like, well, if you're gonna do that, well, I'm a gamer. I'm a prospector. I go camping. I'm a blacksmith. I'm like, well, any one of those things, if you're going to choose those labels, your label is what you do for a hobby. I'm like, well, then I have a lot of labels.
Do you consider, when you look at the term that you say that marketing people created, or that they've taken advantage of at least, do you consider that to be a gendered term?
Nope.
On August 28th, 2014, 10 competing outlets all published articles on the same day. These 10 articles were followed by 9 additional articles on other mostly gaming sites over the next few days, which some saw as calling for an end to the gamer identity. What did you think of these articles?
Well, again, it was proof positive that they were all colluding, and there was a an arranged narrative being pushed. As a result, you saw, things like the Journalist Pros. There was a group of published where you could see they were all colluding, they were all coordinating, right? And I think it was more a case of what we've seen with D&D and a few other, things where they're going, okay, well, we don't like that consumer base because for whatever reason, we don't like them, whether it be ideology or whatever else. Let's, push that consumer base out and try and replace it. And it turns out they're trying to replace it with a market that doesn't exist. They're trying to replace it with a consumer base that doesn't exist.
Why do you think they wrote these articles?
I think there was genuinely a lot of people working in that industry in terms of journalism and the rest of it, they really don't like the consumer base. You just generally get, I think, going back to the narcissism thing, you had these people who just sort of went, oh, I'm going to be working for the Washington Post or, the New York Times or one of these big things, and I'm going to be a big important journalist and tell people what to think. And then they kind of ended up just writing games. And they I think there was a bit of resentment about that. Right? And so, they I could have been a contender syndrome. And so there was a lot of, dislike of the community because it's like, well, we've ended up here by default and we don't like them. So you know what? We're just going to take out our frustrations on them.
If the games press tried to reform, or even just ignored ethical questions, instead of publishing the Gamers Dead articles, do you think this still would have blown up into a massive controversy?
No. Again, if they'd sort of gone, you know what? You've identified some issues. We're going to address those issues, and here is our policies going forward, and they'd stuck to them. It would have evaporated, right? you would have had, you maybe would have still had some of the stuff with Quinn and the conflicts they had there. But if they'd turned around and said, you know what, you have a point, there's a lot of conflict of interest here, we need to do better, and then actually made the effort, it would have disappeared. But the fact that they doubled down, it just kept going.
Why do you think the Games Press didn't go that route instead?
Because they had financial incentives not to. Because again, as we saw, there was a lot of pay for marketing, so pay for play, as they say, right? If they'd done that and they'd actually had to start disclosing things, then I'm sure that they would have said, oh well, the sheer length and depth and breadth of what we've been doing. I think they were afraid that they would stop getting all that sort of marketing money from games companies. And you see a lot of revolving doors between gaming companies and games journalists and things like community managers. All right, so you see this in US politics as well. You see a lot of journalists working on political campaigns and then going, when they're done, going back to working for journalism. Funnily enough, one of my favorite books is Fear and Loathing in 72 by Hunter S. Thompson. Where he covers the Nixon McGovern campaign, and the amount, it's funny reading that in the current era, the amount of revolving door between political campaign and journalist and back again. Hunter was sort of quite derisive of that, and rightly so. But yeah, it's the same thing. Is a lot of those games journalists want to be working in the gaming industry. And if we have to actually start doing our jobs properly and disclosing things and the rest of it, we're not potentially going to get those juicy AAA community manager or writer jobs. So there was kind of that incentive for them to, side with where they thought the money was.
What did you think about games journalism in 2014, 2015, and what do you think of it now?
It's not. There are some really good independents who, like GG did actually sort of get quite a few independents who sort of went, you know what, we're going to start our own games journalism mob and we're going to do it properly. And it also led to the birth of a lot of, VTubers, YouTube type content. So there was some good stuff that comes out of it, but the establishment games press hasn't really changed much. They've got a lot smaller because a bunch of them have sort of gone bust, but their attitude, as we've seen now, the attitudes really haven't changed, right? They got forced to do disclosure by regulatory changes, and I think they do that grudgingly, but they have to. But they didn't do it voluntarily. So in that regard, no, not much has changed. And you still see the revolving door between games journalist stuff and AAA stuff, and people moving back and forth between the two.
Has games journalism gotten better in your view?
Nah. The established, again, I make the distinction between the establishment stuff and the independent stuff. Now, the establishment stuff is just as bad as it always was. It's just that less people care now. They've learnt that it's bad, and they're really not paying much attention to it.
What kind of reforms would you like to have seen happen?
Well, I think we got as good as we were going to get in terms of regulatory changes and, forcing disclosure of paid sponsorships, etc. It would have been nice, ideally, to see a bit more push towards, all right, you can't push your personal politics. Everyone's allowed to have their politics, but when your articles are always skewed towards it. And so, again, I have the same complaint of the other side of the coin where you have the right-wing games crowds like, oh, this game has, degeneracy, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yeah, I don't like you guys either. But you should have been an editorial push towards much more neutral coverage. But the problem is that given that their model, their business model is based on clicks, and they realize that outrage bait generates most clicks, then they're kind of a function of the system at this point. So yeah, that's not changed, and I don't see that changing in the current state, just because the system more or less demands it.
How responsive to calls for reform do you think the Games Press was?
Oh, we clearly see that they weren't. They didn't think, they said for them to want to reform, that would imply that they thought they did something wrong. And again, we really didn't see reform until you saw legislative changes, both in Australia and the US and other places, that forced them to. or their platforms. Again, if they were on YouTube or whatever else, the paid disclosure stuff was implemented. They didn't change because they wanted to. They changed because they were made to.
If you were the editor-in-chief of a gaming website, and some of your employees were credibly accused of ethical violations, rather, how would you have handled the situation?
I would have discreetly contacted those making the accusations and gone, okay, give me proof, give me receipts, show me why you are making these accusations. And then, had I had the ability, got an independent person to do a review and publish the findings and gone, okay, well, the accusations are thus. Here's receipts for, here's receipts against. And, based on, whether those were credible or not, if they were credible, then policy changes and, process would have been updated to reflect it and enforced. It's the same as any business, really.
Do you think there is still a role for good games journalism in the world? And if so, what does that look like to you?
There is, and again, you see there are some good independents out there. So it's the likes of Niche Gamer and a few others where there's an interesting discussion to be had in a lot of cases in terms of mechanics, gameplay, the market. But again, it's very niche, and I think there's going to be kind of one of those things where you're going to have to build your reader base, and you're probably not going to get super rich off it. But if you genuinely engage with your audience and you have the people who like gaming and writing. I think there's a lot of with the establishment stuff. I think there's a lot of problem with a lot of them who are the writers are writers. They don't play games, and we keep seeing this over and over again, where it's clear they don't play games. They just write about them, right? So ideally, you want someone who not only plays games but also writes, right? And we see this in other media as well, where you have a lot of the Marvel studio crowd have openly said, oh, well, if you actually like the content, we're not going to hire you. We want people who quote unquote subvert expectations or, don't like the base. We're just going to hire them. We don't hire fans. So I think there's that problem in the games journalist stuff as well, where they hire people who are writers, but not people who actually play games. So, in my regard, it's like, well, if you're going to write about this stuff, you actually have to enjoy it, because otherwise, you're just going to be miserable. And it's going to show.
In September 2014, it was revealed that nearly 150 games journalists from competing publications were in a mailing group called Game Journal Pros. What did you think of this revelation?
I wasn't shocked, because it was clear that they were coordinating somehow. And the thing is, I still think they are. We haven't found that forum. I think they've just got better at hiding it. So there'll be a Slack group, there'll be a Discord, there'll be a Telegram group. Again, the leaves change, the roots stay the same. So, but again, for a lot of us, it wasn't. It was proof. Was proof positive that we were right. But it wasn't a shock. It's just nice to say, no, we're not crazy. Because again, there was a lot of gaslighting of, oh, we're not coordinating. You're all being, paranoid conspiracy theorists. Oh, actually, we are. Oops. So, it was just kind of nice to be vindicated in that regard.
Some GamerGate supporters believed that pressuring advertisers to pull out would be a good way to convince gaming publications to initiate ethical reforms. What did you think of the strategy?
It was a good strategy. Unfortunately, advertisers weren't. It did have had limited success, but the problem is that a lot of advertisers have marketing people that are of the same mindset as the games journalists, and again, you've got a lot of crossover. So, and the thing is, the other side of the coin, they have no problem going after your income, your livelihood, etc. So they kind of set the rules of the game. We just started following them too. So, again, you saw the anti-crowd had no problem calling people's employers and essentially trying to ruin their life. They thought that was a perfectly fine tactic. They just didn't like it when it was applied to them.
Well, you say that a lot of the advertising people have the same ideology, but a lot of them did actually pull out. Gawker reports that they lost millions of dollars because of the Operation Disrespectful Nod.
But companies
And like Colgate, Mercedes-Benz, Intel, and various others did pull out.
They did temporarily until things died down, and then they went back again. Well, I also think that those companies kind of looked at the ROI they were getting, and just it was sort of for them an excuse to go, you know what? And I also think there was probably a bit of a look at their legal exposure and just go, so your companies in this regard will be very conservative in terms of risk assessment, and they'll go, you know what? Well, we're going to pull it for now, and they may go back later, but from them it was. I'm sure that they've done the risk analysis and looked at, okay, well, we're thus exposed to possible legal risk, and how much is this actually driving sales of our stuff? And not really, so we can spend our marketing money elsewhere. And you kind of saw that across the industry where a lot of those, it was sort of the wake-up call where a lot of them just sort of looked at it going, well, we're just sort of automatically spending money on this stuff. Are we actually getting any bang for our buck for it? And, they actually had a look at it and went, yeah, we're not, so we'll use this as an excuse to go and spend it elsewhere. But as I said, I can't think that I'm only guessing at that point, but I suspect that's what happened. It was sort of a nice, convenient excuse.
Did you support contacting advertisers over ethical violations only, or for other reasons too?
Well, for ethical violations, yes. But again, if you've got, a lot of companies, it's like, well, if you've got these are the brand spokesmen that you're spending money with, you can make them aware of it. And again, it's like all we can do is make them aware of it. It's not like we have power to sort of go, oh well, you have to drop this person, this company or whatever else. But we can say, hey, you are aware they're doing this, right? And then it's up to the company to make the decision whether they want to keep advertising with them or not. But apart from that, no, that's about as far as you should go, right?
Do you have any thoughts on deep freeze?
No, deep freeze was useful because, as we've seen, even then with the Sweet Baby stuff, right? Deep freeze was useful because, the information online is malleable. We're already seeing Sweet Baby go back and edit their website. Like I said, everyone snapshotted it going, no, this is what it looked like. And you're now going through and editing and, changing what you said or trying to sort of respin things. So deep freeze was useful because it was sort of going, well, no, here is the behavior. Here's the pattern of behavior. Here's receipt. So again, more information is always good. If it's accurate, accurate information, there's nothing wrong with it, right? So again, if these people don't want this information, don't want the shitty behavior out there, then stop acting shitty. It comes down to it.
If I may ask, because I've seen people talk about that on Twitter, but I haven't verified it myself. What did they change from their website?
The Sweet Baby stuff, if you go through, there are archives of it. They've more or less changed the wording to remove any mention of the diversity stuff. They've really kind of just softened and generalized it, going, because I think originally they had stuff that explicitly mentioned diversity type ESG stuff, and they've then gone through and softened it, going, oh no, we just do narrative consulting. Right? It was, we do explicitly narrative consulting, helping with diversity, equity, inclusion. No, we just do narrative consulting. Right? So, but yeah, there are before and afters out there.
In August 2015, Michael Koretsky, a regional director for the Society of Professional Journalists, hosted the SPJ Airplay conference. The idea of the conference was to have journalistic ethics experts meet with GamerGate supporters to discuss their concerns about games journalism and the way the media covered GamerGate. The second half of the conference was interrupted by bomb threats, forcing the convention center to be evacuated. Do you have any thoughts on this event?
Again, pattern of behavior. Every time we try and discuss this in a nice, neutral forum, it's disrupted. No, not allowed to talk about that. Right? Again, if you're not doing anything wrong, then you should be able to sit down, have the actual discussion, and things come out of it. The fact that, and again, we don't know who did that, right? Again, it could be the anti-crowd. It could have been the third-party trolls, I'm just going to call them, who just wanted to just stoke the drama, right? So, and unfortunately, there was never police never released if they found out who did it, etc. The problem is that there's the perceptions there that it could have, it probably was the anti-crowd. Can't say for sure. But yeah, it's interesting that having any sort of discussion like that gets shut down one way or another, right? And I said, if you've got nothing to nothing to fear, you don't think you've done anything wrong, well, fine. We should be able to have open, honest discussion, and if reform needs to be made, that's a healthy thing to do.
So, yeah, it's interesting too because I've run meetups. None of my meetups got bomb threats called into them, but two of the panels I hosted, people tried to cancel them. One of them, one time they were successful. An online mob successfully canceled my Archon panel in St. Louis about GamerGate, and then um, someone else tried to pressure apparently NatsuCon, another convention where I ran a panel about GamerGate. They pressured them in real life to try and take it down, but the NatsuCon uh, admins they actually released a statement saying that they believe in free speech and open discussion, and so they were going to allow the
Mm.
discussion to take place as they should have. Archon, unfortunately, they caved into the pressure from the mob.
Yeah, and the thing is, we didn't even try down here because all the big cons down here. The con thing down here is incredibly small compared to sort of North America, and it's all run by one company, ReedPop. And funnily enough, I used to be an enforcer at PAX, and I actually got international ban. I'm not allowed to enforce at PAX ever again at any PAX because I raised because there was a discussion about PAX that we were having space issues. Like we had certain panels where we had people out the door, right? It was that packed, and then you had others that were empty. And one of the things I brought up was just that, again, in hindsight, I should have known better, but from a project management point of view, it's like, well, we've got this big room for the diversity lounge that was 90% empty most of the time. Do we maybe want to move the diversity lounge to a smaller room so we can use that room for bigger events that bring in more people? Yeah, that got me banned.
You're not going to believe this. Actually, you might. But I swear to God it's true. I swear to God it is true. I
Mm.
went to Worldcon in 2023 2022, I guess it was.
Mm.
Um, and they had it was I think it was last year or it could have been the year before. It was the year before. It was 2 years ago. Well, first off, they're like the only place on earth you still have to wear a mask.
Mm-hmm.
Two, they had four different safe spaces. I'm not kidding. I swear to God it's true. And they were empty, at least the times I walked by them. They had coloring books in the safe spaces. They had an everybody safe space. They had a BIPOC safe space. They had a disabled person safe space, and then they had like an LGBT safe space, I believe it was. It was four different ones. That were empty rooms that nobody did anything with, and they had coloring books in them. I swear
Mm-hmm.
to God, it's true.
Yep. I would not be surprised. But yeah, so then funnily enough, I've one of my friends is a guy who was an enforcer from back from the first Australian PAX, right? He was one of the OG enforcers here. He basically said, yeah, all the old school guys have been chased out. They're like, yeah, we've again, they're all professionals. Like, no, we're not going to donate our time and effort to this mob, and it's just been chased out by the progressive crowd. And so again, you look at any PAX now, and you look at all the panels. There's like, again, it's diversity. It's again, I'll look up the last year's one. But again, you look at it, it's just like, yeah, most of this stuff is very niche, aimed at that progressive market. And so people just like, yeah, we're really not going to bother with it. And the thing is, you look at those ones, they're usually, they'll have their audience, but it's the same people going to every one of them.
So
And it's usually only...
did you watch the airplay event as it happened or later on? And did you have any thoughts on the content of the panels?
Again, I thought the panel was being productive for as long as it was going. It was generally, it's like, okay, we want to get to the bottom of this. What are the concerns? And there was an open, honest discussion about like, hey, we and the thing is, I think that Airplay as an the organization of journalists, as they saw there was a problem. Again, journalists are very sensitive to perception, and they're like, yeah, we're having our names dragged through the mud. We should do something about this. And so, yeah, for us, when it was running, it looked like it was going to turn into a reasonably productive discussion, and then of course it got shut down. So, and it's interesting that since Airplay changed leadership, the Society of Professional Journalists changed leadership. Yeah, it's never been revisited. it was
Well,
more or less.
they did do well.
Yeah,
I should say they changed leadership. I think like every year or every couple of
yeah,
years.
yeah.
Um, Koretsky, Koretsky's still part of the organization. He's still a leader
Mm,
within it, the group. So is Lynn Walsh. She was actually the president for a while.
mm, mm,
Very fair with GamerGate. Was actually at AirPlay as well and SafePoint.
mm,
And they did create the Kunkel Awards um, for excellence in gaming journalism. And then after the Kunkel Awards ended, after I think 5 years,
mm,
they then added excellence in gaming journalism as an award for their normal award show.
mm,
So like they have
mm.
been involved like, with like trying to promote better games journalism even after
Yeah,
AirPlay.
and but the problem with SPJ is also it's a case of they're a good organization, but unless they can enforce this stuff, in a lot of cases they can't. Like again, it's um
Well, we wouldn't want any organization to be able to like force quote unquote journalists
no
unquote
no
to.
no no, but enforce ethical, like enforce the ethics behavior, right? So again, if you're going to have a code of ethics, there's got to be carrots and sticks, right? So if people are openly breaking it, well, and the problem is if there's no way of disciplining them, then what's the point,
So
right?
what would the SPJ disciplining them ideally look like to you?
Um, well, again, you could have it saying, well, if you want to be a member of the organization, you're going to have to follow these things, and if they're again, there needs to be a process. If there's an accusation of like, well, hey, you're openly, blatantly, and flagrantly violating these ethics based on here, and here's the receipts, and an investigation finds out that they are, then three strikes for lack of a better system. It's just like, no, you've been warned once, warned twice, three times. No, you've been forced. You are no longer a member of this organization. Out you go, right? Because that's all you can really do, right? And again, you can have it a public process going. Okay, so and so was accused of this. Here's the investigation. Here's the findings. Right? We either find them to be innocent or they were found to have violated this, this, and this. Here's their either whether there's again, they can't really levy fines because they're a voluntary organisation, but again, that there has to be some sort of carrots and sticks, right? So if you're going to have awards for good behaviour, then you're going to have punishment for bad behaviour, right? Otherwise, what's the point of having it?
Why do you think the media largely didn't cover SPJ AirPlay?
Because I think a lot of the media has the same sort of conflicts of interest, just on a much bigger scale. And again, looking back, this was in the the GG Times was ironically it's during another Trump presidential election, right? There's that whole they have pretty much similar conflicts of interest and behaviors, but on a much bigger scale. So they really didn't want to draw attention to that.
Do you have any thoughts on other GamerGate panels like the South by Southwest SafePoint panel or my GamerGate panels at Arch Anime and Natsucon?
I honestly didn't get to see those. I'd have to go back and revisit them. It was that long ago. Um, no, I can't because I don't think I got to see them at the time.
Some people believed that GamerGate should have ended after SPG Airplay. What did you think?
Um, well, not really, because again, all the underlying conditions that were causing it were still there, right? So we and the thing is, after we had a lot of the legislative changes that went through, it kind of did, right? It's we got something achieved. Like it's a small thing, right? We got the disclosure stuff pushed through, and we got legislative changes. So most people just went, "Yep, that'll do." Went off and did something else. So it really, and then after that point, it was mostly the media who was trying to keep that going, right? Again, my wife, funnily enough, did make a comic of just like every year they were still going on about it. She's just like, Vivian just hiding in a coffin, playing, just so she can sit there and play games undisturbed. Just like, hey, every year they bring up Gamergate. She's like, hey, is this about ethics in general? No, then sod off. Go away. So much of it, like from the GG side, we all just went, yep, we've got what we wanted, and went off and did something else. Media kept it going, and thus we're just like, yeah, we live in your head for free. Yeah, we know, whatever.
At
We're the
what
boogeyman under bed.
at what point would you say that the GamerGate people more or less stopped caring, and the media just sort of made up the fake boogeyman and just kept try to keep it alive on their own?
After about sort of end of 2016ish sort of thing is once we sort of got the whole, hey, they've made changes. We saw companies like YouTube and others making those, and then the federal changes for disclosure. Everyone just sort of went, yep, okay, we've achieved something, and went off and did something else.
I
And
you
from
see,
after that, yeah.
maybe it's different because you live in Australia, and maybe the Australian people kind of stopped
Hmm.
caring. I know in the United States, a large number of people will continue to. In fact, 2017 was a very active year. That's where most of the meetups happened. It seems 2016 and then 2017.
Hmm.
And there was some stuff happening in 2018 as well, but I did die down here as well around
Yeah,
around
I think
2018. It seemed people stopped caring about it as much.
Yeah, but I think a lot of it also was good way to catch up. Like again, when you've been those meetups, it's like it was as much a social thing as everything else. But I think that was also a reaction because you had
Well, and torrential
The US.
downpour, of course, was like the big GamerGate
Yeah,
operation, I guess, at the time.
yeah. But you also had that you had the media as well in that period. Again, those were sort of what peak Trump years, wasn't it? In terms of, so you had the media just going, we're just going to scream and rant and try and tie you to Trump and you're all bad and you're all evil. I think it just a lot of it was still reacting to that. That's why it's kind of died down in 2018. Really, you had that media gestalt of just like, well, everything bad is right wing Trump, GamerGate, rah rah rah, and that was just they just kept doing it and people kept reacting to it. And when it died off, it's interesting that it died off around the same time that you had a change in politics in the US.
Well, Trump won the election in 2016 and then was
Yeah.
president for like well into
Oh yeah,
2017.
yeah, yeah.
Well, it started 2017, I guess, January.
Yeah. But again, you had the media still running with it, and I think there was just that reacting to it. It's like, well, they keep doing the thing, we keep reacting to it. And I just think at some point our side just sort of went, yeah, you know what, bored now. Gonna go off and do something else.
Have you seen the Airplay documentary that came out recently?
No, I haven't. I'll have to have a look.
That's pretty good. Do you think the GamerGate banner should have been used to take on gaming industry issues outside of just games journalism?
Um, Probably not, because the problem is that if you start putting multiple things under that sort of banner, they all get diluted, and then it all just ends up being a noisy mess. But I do believe that, yeah, there's a lot of issues within the games industry. So tangentially, for a while, I worked in the VFX industry, and seeing what an absolute meat grinder it was. And there was a lot of, because I lived in Vancouver for a while, there was a lot of overlap between VFX and gaming, and just things in terms of working conditions and the way people are treated. There should absolutely be those issues dealt with, right? I've had things where there was a while where I was sort of trying to get into the the gaming industry in terms of because in the VFX industry I used to run render farms, but getting into that industry, and then you go, oh no, if you're going to work in the game industry, you have to do your time at EA. There is no one will talk to you unless you've actually done time in the trenches at EA. And I'm like, and then I hear what the working conditions were like at EA at the time. This is probably 2008, 2000, between about 2008 2012, and just what an absolute psychotic meat grinder it was. Hey, you're going to be working 16-hour days, and you're not going to have a life, and you're going to get paid shithouse for it, but at least you'll be in the gaming industry. I'm like, yeah, movie industry was kind of the same, and I'm like, yeah, you know what, I'm out.
Were you involved with the artistic freedom side of Gamergate, and did you consider that to be part of it, or part of Gamergate, or a separate conversation?
It's a separate conversation because the artistic freedom thing is always sort of been an issue, but I don't think that was core to it, because not at the time, because you really didn't have the sort of puritanical wokey stuff that you do now, right? I think that has evolved in an unhealthy way, right? You kind of had a little bit of the whole, well, sexy women in games is bad, but that's really sort of taken on as the progressive side of things has morphed and sort of mutated. So I think that's more of a discussion to be had now, but it wasn't really a big thing back in the day, but it was still an element of it.
What do you think of arguments about video games causing or reinforcing real-world sexist attitudes?
There is no objective proof of that, and there's been any good studies that have been done on that don't reinforce it in any way, shape, or form. right? Again, it's the same argument that, oh, well, media causes violence. Media's media, right? Whether it be, they sort of focus, well, games are interactive. I'm like, not really. Again, I'm someone who's never started a fight in my life, but I've played all manner of violent games, and they don't have, they don't make me aggressive. I don't feel the need, if I've been playing Doom 2016 for a while, I don't feel the need to go out and punch someone. No, again, I don't buy that for I think it's one of those ones where you'll have people who have underlying mental health and violence issues will be drawn to those sort of games, and the root cause is their mental health, not the game, right? There's so much of it. Oh, well, the game made them go and shoot up a school. Like, no, they had an underlying mental health issue. They just happened to be drawn to violent things because of it. Because prior to games, you saw that if you go through and you look at the history of people who've, horrible serial killers and all this sort of stuff, you look at, oh, well, they'd get violent media of some form, right? It's not that the media made them violent, is they were dysfunctional people who went looking for violent media. So.
Well, that's the next question about the video games causing violence argument. You believe that to be wrong too, then you said?
No, that's putting the cart before the horse, right? So again, you look at the sheer number of people who play games, violent games. You look at the sales for Doom, you look at all, and then you look at the tiny percentage of people who do undergo violent behavior. Yeah, it's not gaming. Otherwise, if that were the case, then the violence numbers would be a lot higher.
Some political activists believe that using social media campaigns to demand artists change artistic elements of their work was a good thing, such as hashtag change the cover. What did you think of this tactic?
Well, again, it's consumer. It's people making their opinions known, and it's up to individual artists as to whether they want to pay attention to that. So again, you had those people going, oh, well, you're not allowed, and this is the thing is you see it always goes one way, right? Oh, well, you can't have sexy women on covers of stuff. Oh, but you can have sexy muscled up men. You can, that's not a problem. Oh, it's just basically, and then you're seeing this increasingly, in more modern games, is you can't have attractive women because, certain groups of gamers might actually enjoy that. We can't have that. So again, I think there's a lot of that we don't like our audience and we're going to just shit on them mentality. So, and again, at the end of the day, it's up to the individual artists whether they want to pay attention to that sort of stuff or not. Right? Again, it's not like people are sort of rocking up to their house and banging on their door or threatening them, and I don't encourage that, or endorse that. It's, well, no, you can either pay attention to it or you can just wave it off and go, no, my art style, I'll do what I want.
Where do you think the lines are between criticism and advocacy of censorship, or is there a line in this case?
There's criticism in terms of, again, constructive criticism. Having being married to someone who's an artist and working, with creative people is criticism can be constructive, right? So it's just like, okay, if for example, there's stuff where you see them doing, fan services, like, okay, if that's not conducive to the story or you're just putting it in for titillation's sake, again, it just you can have the criticism of like, well, that just makes it, it breaks immersion, it makes the story bad, it's not needed, versus you're doing a sexy thing that's bad because I don't like it, right? It's for my political reasons, is I think that's bad because I think any portrayal of women in a sexual manner is bad. Funnily enough, the going back to the anime thing is, you look at, you have the Western crowd going on about, oh, anime is sexist and they're doing all this stuff with, look at these drawings of women. I'm like, you do realize that most of the people who draw that sort of stuff are women, right? And it was always funny pointing that out, and you'd have the usual crowd going off about that, and you'd bring up examples of Clamp and go, oh, look at this stuff from Clamp, the old studio. It's like, hey, it's really, oh yeah, it's terrible. Like, you do realize Clamp is 100% women, right? And then you just get crickets. It's always funny.
Do you have any thoughts on the removal of content from Japanese or other foreign games when they are localized?
Oh, again, I absolutely hate it, and again, I dislike that because it's Western, again, Western people with a particular political bent determining what Western people should and should not see, and it's horrible. I find it horribly disrespectful to the Japanese artists. again, you're going through and you're changing someone else's art to suit, because you think you know better, right? That I cannot abide.
Have you heard of the Otaru group?
No, I haven't.
Okay, I won't ask about it then. I don't know much. I don't know anything
Mm,
about the topic really.
mm.
Some critics of Gamergate have argued that the movement was mostly or entirely right wing. Do you think that was accurate?
No, because again, I can speak from experience with the people down here. It's like, no, we got people of all spectrums, but the issue being that the people usually making those criticisms they are all extreme. I dislike the left wing, right wing thing. I think it's completely meaningless in common politics because it's something that came out of the French Revolution and it just really doesn't mean anything anymore. Where it's more or less become shorthand of right wing bad, left wing good. But I find the people making those accusations were, for lack of a better term, extremely left wing, extremely, neo progressive. I say neo-progressive because I actually like Teddy Roosevelt, and he was an original progressive. But yeah, they're sort of the neo-progressives, and it's like, yeah, they pretty much say anyone who's not on board with them is right-wing, so it's more or less meaningless.
Do you want to talk about your political views or philosophy?
I am very much a centrist, right? Again, like I said, I work as an elections officer, so for me, I want to make sure that the process is followed. Pragmatic, lawful, neutral joke. But yeah, as long as the process is followed, again, it's really in terms of politics. I say common sense, but common sense isn't common. In terms of just said, I'm pretty much centrist in a lot of things. It just depends on the issue. Again, I'm one of those ones when I vote, it's just I don't vote for any party out of habit. It's more a case of, okay, who's running in my seat and what are they running on and what do I most agree with. So, again, in terms of US politics, I'd be very much an uncommitted voter.
Have your politics changed since Gamergate or due to Gamergate?
Kind of. They've changed in some respects because I've seen how bad the progressive crowd are. And I'm just like, okay, there was some issues that they would broke, and I'm like, you know what? I'm not on board with that anymore. And like, I've kind of sort of, they've, the old thing of they've abandoned me sort of thing. I'm like, yeah, you know what? I'm not going to go that far. And again, things like, drag queens in schools and children's libraries. I'm like, no, there's a time and a place for that, and it's not there. Stuff like that. I'm just like, no, again, that's wildly inappropriate for the context. I'm like, why would you need to do that? Sort of thing. So in some respects, it's more a case of I'm still in the center. I'm like, no. Again, there's times and places for things, and there seems to be this push of we're going to see what we can get away with. I'm like, yeah, there's got to be a line somewhere.
Are you okay with gaming sites criticizing games through a political or religious lens, such as a Marxist, feminist, Christian, or other lens?
They can if they want to. I don't agree with it because if they want to apply a certain lens, then fine. If as long as they say they're open about their disclosure and their biases, okay, that's fine. Like they can have those biases. They're allowed to have their opinions. Doesn't mean I have to agree with them. But as long as again the one of the big complaints I have is when they're very disingenuous about that, right? And again, going back to the Hunter S. Thompson thing with his book, he's always very upfront. He's like, no, I'm very out. Throughout the book, he's like, no, I like McGovern. He was always very, what? I'm openly biased. He put his hand up like, I'm openly biased towards McGovern, right? And again, if you're going to be openly biased one way or the other, fine, just state it up front, and so we can, take that into account when we read whatever you're writing.
Do you think there can be any value in analyzing games or other works of art through a political lens?
Um, Depends. It really depends. Like, there's some stuff where where the game itself has political themes. It's worth analyzing, but even then, doing it through any political lens is always going to introduce bias one way or the other. So, again, it depends on your politics. You might have ones where they're really just drawing a very long bow, trying to go, oh, that's, again, we see this in a lot of the progressive stuff. It's like, well, this is a commentary on capitalism. Like, not really. But as it goes back to the previous question, is like, as long as their biases are up front, they can try and make any argument they want. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a good one.
Some people say that GamerGate was the, quote, first battle of the culture war, unquote. Do you have any thoughts on that framing?
It was the first, again, it's kind of, it's kind of, GamerGate was World War One, but if you look at the history, there was sort of minor battles prior to that, like, the Russo-Japanese War and a couple of others prior to World War One that were indicators of what was to come. I think there were a few ones prior to GG. I escape my memory now, but I do remember there was a few controversies. Prior to that were just sort of hints of what was to come. So I think GG was the major flare up of just like, okay, we've really all had enough of this. But there were previous controversies to that sort of were telegraphing what was about to happen.
What do you think of the framing of GamerGate being a response to a moral panic about video games?
Not really. It wasn't really about a moral panic at all. It was about, again, consumers wanting to be respected by the industry that was supposed to, was claiming to service them. There was the moral panic stuff back in the day with Jack Thompson and the rest of it, but that was entirely different. And you kind of had the moral panic coming from the other side, but that wasn't nearly as part of it. It was an aspect of it, but it wasn't the main thing.
What do you think of the framing of GamerGate as a battle between those who believed in classical liberal values like artistic freedom, free speech, and pluralism, and those who didn't?
I'd say that's a pretty accurate representation because, again, you had a lot. Well, it wasn't primary, but it was there. There was an undercurrent of that, and again, that's never really gone away. In that you are kind of seeing this neo-progressivism being pushed and pushed and pushed at the expense of artistic freedom. And again, we keep seeing it where, well, you have an artist, who wants to have a game and they want to have attractive women. Oh no, you can't have that. We don't like that. We're gonna try and force that or censor that or neuter that, sort of thing. So that, again, that has been going on. In terms of artist stuff, that's been going on for generations. But it's just the battlefield's kind of changed a bit. It's gone from and you're still seeing it in other traditional media. You're seeing it in animation and again anime stuff, and you're seeing it in TVs. You don't see as much of TV as movies anymore because it's more or less been won, and you just got the progressive crowd more or less just going around bayoneting the wounded at this point. But you get an independent project that pops up that sort of bucks the trend. But for the by and large, I think you're seeing it in gaming because it's that battle's been won everywhere else, and not to the benefit of the artist, sadly.
Well, the next segment here is about your interactions with the other side, and ironically enough, Miss Sonata, one of the anti-Gamergate people that I've interviewed, has a book exclusive. She just popped into chat. So I'll ask you now, did you interact with any anti-Gamergate people?
Well, we've had one at the meetup, and again, it wasn't for lack of trying. Like we try and sort of have the discussion, and anytime we tried, we just get bad faith arguments and just the whole, well, no, we're here to lecture you. We're not here to actually have a discussion. We're here to lecture you. And so you're like, well, again, if you're not open to having an honest discussion, then why would we bother? Right? If we're going to get lectured, fine, you can lecture. It doesn't mean we agree with you. And again, you're not going to browbeat us because your arguments make no sense. And even to this day, I'm more than happy to have discussions with the quote unquote other side, as long as they're open, honest, and in good faith, right? Like if we're willing to discuss and can see, and try and sort of understand each other's points of view, right, and not have one side just here to lecture, fine, more than happy to have those discussions. But it almost never happens.
Did you ever change anyone's mind on Gamergate?
Yeah, there's been quite a few people who rocked up to the meets expecting one thing, found out it was another, and ended up just engaging. And like I said, the thing is, those people especially if they worked in the industry in a way, shape, or form, sort of quietly agreed with us. But again, it was just the whole can't openly agree with you because I have bills to pay and, rent to make sort of thing. But in a lot of cases, over time, they, changed their ways, or they went out and did other projects, and but it was always, this is the thing. I don't expect to change anyone's mind overnight, right? If someone comes up to me and they have a discussion and I don't expect them to fully go, oh, you've completely changed my mind on the issue. That doesn't happen, more often than not. But as long as people get thinking, and if they sort of go through it and come to their own conclusions, and they decide, you know what, I was wrong. And again, we've had people like some of the people that were the meet were very, very progressive far lefties, right? Who rocked up because they were just curious. They'd had doubts in terms of stuff on their own side, and they were just curious, and sort of they were going to rock up and it was like, well, I'm either going to be vindicated or I'm going to be proven wrong. I want to see which it is. And rocked up, in a lot of cases, they're like, and then they just start going through the motions of sort of going, all right, I'm going to even just start looking at what the other side is saying, right? Rather than, and you see this, a lot of people, it's just like they will not engage with the other side, right? They're like, no, they are, absolute, I can't, they are Satan, they are evil. I will not even look at them because to do so is heresy, right? And a lot of it I think is an ego protection thing, because if, it's kind of, if you've got people with dysfunctional egos, I'm not talking us, just in general, it's just like, well, if I was wrong about X, then I've potentially been wrong about Y and wrong about Z and implications, and I can't deal with that. No, so I'm just not going to, right? But you do get the other people who actually go, okay, maybe I was wrong about that, and if I've been wrong about that, then what else have I been wrong about? And then they go down that journey and go, oh, I've been either stuff that's been, told to me has either been massively misrepresented, or I've been outright lied to, and they end up sort of usually drifting back towards the center.
I don't usually take questions from the chat, but since we're in the interact with the other side section, and we do have an anti-GamerGater asking a question in chat, yep. I'll put it to you. She asks that because, I'm rewording it a little bit, because companies make these games and they're motivated by profit and have investors and executives who aren't even working on the game themselves, who potentially have input into the project, what does artistic freedom really mean when we're talking about a commercial product, when you're talking about a team of people working together, some of whom might have positions of hierarchical authority over others on the team?
Unfortunately, that's a trade-off you make when you're working for commercial artistry. In fact, my wife would be, Zerabin would be a better one to ask about this, because she, she's trained and worked in the industry. Unfortunately, you're sort of making a bit of, the old Full Metal Alchemist thing. You become a dog of the military. Well, in this regard, it's like you're going to have artistic freedom, but you're going to have to work within the confines of, the company you're working for. So, you can take the position of, well, the company wants it done a certain way. That's fine. But again, you can still do your own projects. Again, work affords you other interests. So if you're a creative person and you're not being, you want to have artistic freedom, but you're not being fulfilled at work, well, then you can do stuff on your own time. You can work on your own side projects. So, yeah, it's again, in terms of that commercial stuff, no, there's no such thing as absolute artistic freedom, unfortunately. You are confined within the system you're working. But you can still advocate, right? You can still say, hey, we potentially think there's a better way of doing this, and it's always going to be working within a team, right? If you want to have complete artistic freedom on a project, then you're going to have to do an independent one, right? Because that's going to... And the other side of that is sometimes it's healthy to have people to tell you no, right? So, for example, look at Star Citizen. I can, as a project manager, right, I see what happens in a lot of the gaming industry, and I tear out what little hair I have left, because a lot of it screams of terrible project management. Having people say, no, or, well, no, but here's constructive criticism of another way you can do it, you should always have that feedback. It's an issue when you've got artistic restrictions in that you can't have that character be sexy. You can't have that character, oh, that's too much, that's, it has to be this way. So when you have it being done by committee, and it comes, and I really do feel for the artists working on this stuff. And again, when I worked in Vancouver, I'd hear all sorts of stories, and I genuinely feel that, and a lot of them, it is soul destroying, right? That they're working for these companies, but at the same time, it's like, well, I've got bills to pay and the rest of it. I don't feel that I could do, some of them just don't have the mentality or the psychological profile to be independent like that. They can't, and this isn't, this is not a criticism of them as such. It's just a fact, right? They can't handle the risk. They're not in a financial or mental position to run a fully independent project. You just said they're just going to have to do stuff on the side and do the art that they want to do. But yeah, again, there's no way I'm ever going to pick on a particular artist. If you're working for a company and you're being told by your bosses that you have to do it a certain way, I completely understand, right? I don't have the like with my job. There's a lot of things I'd like to do in my job a different way. It's got to be a collaborative process, and I am not the CEO. I'm not in a position where I can dictate. A lot of artists aren't. I genuinely feel for them.
Are you friends with anyone on the other side?
I used to be, but again, with some of those friendships, they ended not because I didn't want to be friends. We've had people who originally joined the GG thing, and they kind of went hyper left, and they ended up leaving us. Right? I actually enjoy having discussions with people from all sorts of different political viewpoints. Right? Again, as long as they're open up, again, we can agree to disagree. Right? If people don't agree with my opinions or my views, that's fine. And, as long as they don't expect me to absolutely agree with theirs or nothing else, fine. We can agree to disagree, and we can have mutual respect. Again, most of the people I'm still friends with from the old GG days, a lot of us hold very different political opinions, but that's half the fun, right? We can have these discussions. But in a lot of cases, you had people who kind of who started out in the center, who ended up going sort of more into that very neo-progressive crowd. They ended up leaving us because they were afraid that their friends would find out that they're essentially associating with the enemy. And they were very sort of apologetic, but guys, they were either concerned for their social standing, that it was going to affect their employment. And we're like, well, okay, the door's always open. You're always welcome to come back. We kind of feel bad for them, but, it's not for lack of wanting on our part.
How could the conversation about GamerGate have been more productive?
Again, that would require one side actually coming to it in good faith and not lecturing, and just going, okay, you've got concerns, you've got things that you want to talk about. Let's talk about them in an open and honest way. That I don't think was ever going to happen with that environment.
Do you have any thoughts on Not Your Shield?
Oh yeah, again, you had a lot of, you said the traditional women, people of color, gay, being used as shields. It's they have every right to stand up and go, no, you don't get to speak for me, right? I'm fine with these things. I support these, these opinions, whatever else. You do not speak for me. And again, that should be for any group. I wouldn't want anyone speaking for me. Oh, well, this person believes X. I'm like, well, no, I don't. Hang on, no, you don't get to talk to me. I'm a big person. I have my own words. So yeah, said a lot of people I think got really sick of being used like that. Again, I know quite a few of the crowd we're friends with, they're gay, but they really do not like associating with the quote unquote LGBT community, because they're like, no, you don't speak for me. In fact, you kind of embarrass me in terms of a lot of the ways you behave, right? It's just a case of, yeah, I happen to like, the same sex or, both sexes, whatever else. I'm like, that's it. I don't want to be associated with any of the other crap you do. So it's funny, you find most of the most vicious critics of the LGBT community tend to be people who've been a part of it in the past.
The GamerGate discussion was widely censored online. Why do you think that was?
Well, we now know that the people, like I said, the moderation team on Twitter, for example, they had friends, friends in the industry. Right, there was all this really big incestuous crossover, and so they all had a sort of a mutual interest to be all helping their friends, right? Because again, you had all these sort of revolving doors between various industries. That seems to have gone away a lot. right? And again, you had it in places like 4chan as well, where you had moderators that were shown to be who have infiltrated that had links between, the quote unquote other side. So yeah, there was just this really, nasty incestuous relationship between a bunch of these places. And you find that the people who tend to do this, you see this with Reddit moderators as well, is, the old joke that they do it for free, is they do it because it gives them a sense of power. For whatever reason in their own life they don't have that, they find it, they want to have a sense of power over others. Well, they end up doing it on things forum, being forum moderators and the rest of it, not getting paid for it. But that's not what they're not doing it for monetary compensation. They're doing it for a psychological need. And
Well,
yeah.
and some of them aren't even doing it for free. Are you familiar with Mr. Ian Miles Chung's case?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, with how, yeah. Well, I'm possibly interviewing him, so we can talk about that further in the interview, assuming he
Mm,
doesn't back out.
uh,
All right, so I know we've been going a minute here,
mm,
and I'm okay, but if you need a break, we can take a few minutes. It's up to you.
no, I'm good.
Cool. So we've got the harassment slash sexism portion coming up, media
Mm-hmm.
coverage, light items, your reflections on the movement, and then closing questions, okay?
Yep.
All right. Why do you think some people claim? Actually, I want to ask. You say the 4chan thing. Many people have mentioned this. What's the best evidence or receipts you've seen, and could you send them to me if you have them, relating to people in 4chan having connections with Zoe Quinn's community? We can say.
The problem is that predates 4chan. That again, you've got the old. It's the old hell dump crowd. They never went away, right? So you had the troll crowd, and again, I don't think there's so much that they were collaborating on 4chan and the rest of it, but you still, something awful was still up at the time. Again, I still reckon that hell dump crowd they all keep together. And as much as people sort of dunk on Kiwi Farms does have records of stuff like that. There's actually a forum dedicated to it called Rat Kings, right? So they're not documenting making fun of a person. They're like, okay, here is what they call. Do you know what a Rat King is?
I do not.
Okay, so a Rat King is when you get a bunch of rats, and they're all so densely packed that their tails all get tangled up, and they all get trapped together. So a Rat King in Kiwi Farms parlance is, it's not just an individual person; it's a bunch of people. Basically a little group. They colloquially got named Rat Kings. And so again, with things like my Felix Kramer and Quinn and the rest of it, they're all part of the same the Rat King, right? That's all that sort of group. So again, the problem is the receipts are kind of out there, but I have to go looking. But said a lot of the times, a lot of this stuff predates the old something awful days.
We do have a couple things in chat. Miss Sonata says she'll be your anti-GamerGate friend, Wombat. And
Yeah, good.
JT
More than
Vega. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, no, yeah, go continue.
JT Vega asks if you're the person who sells dragon dildos. Is there a story
No,
there?
no, that's not me. I have no idea where that's coming from.
Why do you think some people claimed that GamerGate was about harassment and or hating women?
Because it was politically expedient and it worked, right? Because again, it's like you're doing bad things because people framing, oh, you're picking on Zoe Quinn. I'm like, well, no, she just happens to be the lightning rod for it because of the corruption and the fact that she was sleeping with multiple people, and getting benefit from it, right? And so it just kind of morphed into an effective. It's the same tactic, like, well, you hate women and you're a racist who hates women. So people just automatically get that. That's all they hear. They don't want to dig any deeper. Like, oh, well, is that actually true? They'll reflexively go, oh, there must be a bad person, right? So they found it was a tactic that worked, and so they just kept using it, right? Again, have never said, we had plenty of women turn up to GG meets. None of my group have ever, we wouldn't actively associate with people like that. I wouldn't actively associate with people like that. So no, I don't buy it. That was mostly a media. It was kind of a media invention, and then you had the third-party troll crowd who would just go and because they saw that worked, would just stoke the flame, sort of thing. They had no nihilists who just wanted to see both sides attacking each other, sort of thing.
Are you familiar with, or do you have any thoughts on, the studies about Gamergate and harassment, such as the Women Action Media study, the Newsweek/Brandwatch study, and the Nimbus study?
Seen the studies. My opinion, studies were bad, and they had a conclusion before they went out to more or less. They had a conclusion, and then they cherry picked the data to fit it. So again, it was kind of one of those ones. I haven't looked at them in depth, but
because they found Gamergate wasn't a harassment campaign.
Okay,
All three of them did.
Yeah. But I've seen other ones where they went and cherry picked it. Well, it's bad. But again,
I was only familiar with the 3 studies. What's this fourth? Do you have a link to any others? I don't think there were any others. Unless you're talking about the Newsweek/Brandwatch study, which the study itself showed that Gamergate wasn't a harassment campaign, but Newsweek literally lied in their article and said Gamergate hates women. The study shows, even though if you look at the actual study itself, it shows the opposite.
Yeah, no, I haven't seen them. And again, it's any time that people actually look at it, like, no, they don't. They've got some legitimate complaints. Yeah. But okay, there's been other ones. I think there's academic ones I've seen. I'll have to find them. But they more or less.
Link them to me. I'll interview the authors.
Yeah.
What do you think of the Gamergate anti-harassment patrol?
Well, again, it was more or less a case of we knew that there was third-party trolls out there, and we're like, okay, we are trying to sort of make the best effort to say, look, we're generally not harassing people. Here are the people who are actually doing the thing. Go after them, right? So again, we were going in with the whole, we're not the ones doing it. We genuinely, if people are being harassed, great, we want those people dealt with, right? We're not defending them. We're not protecting them, right? They're not with us. So if that was the best we could do, right? But it just seems that it was like, we were trying to make a good faith effort to say, no, we're not harassing people. And if people are being harassed, great, deal with them, with the whatever rules the platform has. So,
how important to you was it that bad actors were condemned?
Oh, again, it was really quite important because, again, like the rest of us, like, no, we want to focus on the one thing. And we've all recognized that bad actors like that were aiding the other side, because the other side will automatically assume it's us and go, oh, well, see. And we're like, no, that's counterproductive. Can you not do that? Because like we have a focus in mind of what we want to achieve, and if you're just here to screw things up, then we'll go away, right? We're not interested. So,
do you think most Gamergate people did a good job condemning harassment?
Oh, again, I think they did the best that they could, but the fact that you had one side who had a vested interest in amplifying the bad and minimizing the good, you're only going to be able to achieve so much, right? So again, we saw that there was the other side who just like, oh no, we're just going to pick all the bad things and ignore the fact that they're disavowing this and they're saying they're not doing it. Well, we're just going to ignore that, right? We're going to, as I said before, lie by omission.
If you saw someone, quote, on your side, unquote, doing something you thought was bad, how would you handle that situation?
I tell you how I've handled, because I had it before. Again, they'd get a DM from me going, can you stop doing that, please? It's counterproductive. Explain why, right? And basically, go through that and keep it private to begin with, to see if we can get them to sort of understand why that is bad. And it would be very clear very quickly whether they were actually doing it to be one of those third-party trolls, or they didn't understand why. And again, did run into people like that who, again, dealing with a lot of people on the autism spectrum disorder, it's a case of, okay, don't do that, it's bad, here's why it's counterproductive, and then offer a better way of doing things, right? And a lot of cases that they took that on board and ended up doing it. Whereas you had others who were just there, was like, no, I'm just here to stir shit. Like, well, yeah, if they're going to be like that, then it's basically, put the word out to the community and, more or less block them. That's all you can do, right?
You don't have to answer or talk about it,
Mm.
but we've already talked about it in the beginning, I guess.
Yeah.
But did you experience any harassment during GamerGate from either side or from third-party trolls?
Oh yeah, I got DMs all the time. I'm like, again, I've been on the internet since, before most of these kids were born. It's like, I'm thick-skinned. I come from a country where we call each other a certain c-word epithet as a term of endearment. You can't upset me. You'd have to be trying. And most people are like, you don't know me well enough to piss me off, so I'm just gonna laugh at you and block you.
And do you know what were these messages like that they were sending? Obviously, there's the bomb threat, but the two bomb threats, but aside, or multiple
I
bomb threats, two different times.
you
But aside from
you
that, what were the messages that you were
oh,
being sent, and do you have evidence of this?
again, it's under an old Twitter account I no longer have access to. You just get DMs from like a sock puppet account, so it'd just be like a newly created account, a bunch of numbers, look like a bot, and it would just be, oh, you hate women, oh, you're all racist. It'd just be random abuse. I'd say it was so passe, I don't even remember it specifically. It'd just be a case of, oh, that's nice, block, ignore.
And,
It's really,
and you
not
don't
worth. It
remember if
wasn't worth.
these were anti-Gamergate people or if they were trolls or
It could have been both. Right. Again, the problem was that the trolls will put on masks. If they're trolling one side, they'll put on the mask of the other, and vice versa. So again, I couldn't say with any reliability as to whether it was definitively, the anti-GG crowd of trolls. But the net result was the same. It's like, oh, it's an abusive message. Nah, whatever, block. It's again, if people message me with like they wanted to discuss stuff, or they're like, oh, we don't think this is working because X, engage in discussions with them. But if it's just outright abusive messages and just like, block. So it's not worth it. You can ask, again, it's probably more of a question for my wife because she does get messages regarding her aunt and the rest of it every so often, and she's quite good at putting them in their place. And she was just like, oh, but because again, it's funny. She got, when she did her GG art, she got called, oh, you're a guy, rah, rah, and she's like, no, actually, I'm a woman. And again, suddenly you had the anti-crowd who would go after her and like, oh, you're a guy, and she's like, no, actually, I'm a woman. And then it was really funny because in a lot of cases you go, oh, I'm so sorry, my lady. Yeah, oops, yeah.
Miss Sonata says that she thinks you have the Rat King thing wrong. She says
Mm,
that it was just a bunch of queer people who are friends with each other.
yeah, but again, that is really a distinction without a difference. In that, if you've got a bunch of people who are friends with each other, who are all acting in unison and all sort of acting in the same way and doing the same sort of stuff, again, it's one of those grey areas. Like, yeah, you can all be friends with each other, but if you're all friends with each other and you're all doing the same shitty thing, but again, I'll find the receipts for the Rat King thing because that's give me a bit and I'll send that through. But no, the Rat King thing has receipts, and I'll see if I can find them. But I'm just running off memory. But yeah, again, that's kind of a distinction without a difference. It's like, okay, they're a bunch of friends with each other, all right, and they're all behaving the same way, and they're all unofficially coordinating, but the net results kind of the same, right? But I said there's evidence from the old Kiwi farm, the old something awful days.
Why do you
For that
think the
particular,
media largely didn't cover harassment against Gamergate supporters?
because it fitted their narrative. They're like, well, no, we can't portray these people in any sort of sympathetic way, and we can't sort of show that our, quote unquote, our side is behaving just as badly, if not worse. So there was kind of, again, a vested interest of lying by omission.
Do you have any thoughts on Zack Attack?
Oh god, that's gone back. Not off the top of my head. I do remember vaguely what that was about, but
Do you have any thoughts on the con leaks?
I'm trying to remember that one as well. Basically, oh, that's right, yeah. Where again, you had cons who were, I think the memory was, cons who were sort of coordinating to say, oh, we want to keep these people out because we don't like them.
No, no.
No.
Uh,
Yeah, again, I'm
that was
misremembering.
that was Crash Override Network. They're one of their internal people. I know who it was, but I'm not going to say publicly.
Mm.
They released their chat logs from their group,
Mm.
and this has been confirmed by members of the group, and it's quite extensive. And it shows that they were members of Zoe Quinn's inner circle. Essentially, were harassing people, and a
Mm.
bunch of other stuff too. Like they actually had a Wikipedia editor, Ryu Long,
Mm-hmm.
who was one of the most prolific Wikipedia editors. Actually, he's made
Yeah.
thousands of edits on Wikipedia and on Rational
Yeah.
Wiki about
But
GamerGate.
this, yeah. But
But they
funnily
were
enough, this
actually
goes.
they had him basically on. Well, they had him
Yeah.
as a connection so that anytime they didn't like it something in the article or a
Yeah.
related article, they would ask him to change it for them since he had a lot of power
Yeah.
on Wikipedia.
Yeah. But this goes back to my that's a rat king, right? That's the sort of rat king I'm talking about. So to say that they're all just friends and they're not they all just happen to be friends. I'm like, well, hang on, no. When then you go back to that, no, that's a rat. That's an example of a rat king. All right, where they're all together and they're all behaving in unison, right? They're all coordinating. That is exactly what I'm talking about in terms of rat king.
What do you think of the term sea lioning?
Um, Yeah, that one again. It was the whole we don't want to engage in discussion. It's like again, we're like, well, we want to talk about this. Oh no, we don't want to. Well, we want to actually talk about this. You're saying that you want to have these discussions about all this ethics and the rest of it. It's like, well, great, let's have the discussion. No, come back again. Have the debate. Have the discussion. Where are you going? No. So again, it was that whole sea lining was essentially the other side acting in bad faith. Is they're going, oh, we want to have this discussion. Well, okay, we'll have this. Oh, no, yeah. And again, because no one was taking the bait because they knew like the other side only wanted to have discussions on their terms, which was more or less, we're going to lecture you and you're going to listen. You're going to educate yourself, bigot, as it were. And we're like, well, no, that's not what we're here for. That's not a discussion.
No,
That's getting lectured.
Well, the Sea Lion comic was created by an anti-Gamergate person. Well, actually, I don't know if they've
Yeah.
ever actually said what their view is, but it was shared by them
Mm,
because they thought that the Gamergaters were the ones who were sea lions or acting like sea
mm,
lions.
mm. Yeah, but again, it was like, well, no, we wanted to have those open and honest, we wanted to have those discussions, and like every time they'd put they'd put it out there, and we'd sort of go, okay, let's have it. Yeah, you want to have this, put it more or less, put up or shut up. And so a lot of people got very sort of, well, you keep doing this, and so we're going to keep, every time you put your hand up saying you want to do this thing, we'll do it, but we're not doing it on your terms. We're going to do it in more neutral terms. And they're like, no, stop harassing us, sort of thing. We, unless you're going to, discuss things on our terms, that we're not going to discuss them.
Do you have
So
any,
I think a lot, yeah.
Do you have any thoughts
Go
on
on.
the burgers and fries stuff?
I think that was mostly, again, that was just people laughing at the whole situation, right? It's just like, we kind of, I think the community knew that sort of stuff was was happening. And then, but just the sheer, like the fact that Quinn had done it to that level, I think it was just mostly just laughing at it. And the fact that sort of dirty laundry ended up out there, I think it was people mostly just pointing and laughing, and it just went from there.
Do you have any thoughts on GG Revolt?
Yeah, this is the thing. I think that was a subset of GG Revolt. I think was actually a subset of people who, again, I guess they were sort of feeling that things weren't going to the level that they wanted to, and they wanted to see more direct results, and they sort of thought that more direct action was needed. Yeah, like I said, I know some of the. I still talk with some of the GG Revolt guys on Twitter, and like I could understand their frustration, put it that way. I mean, again, in a lot of cases, I don't agree with the more extreme methods they were proposing or went through, but I could sort of understand where their frustration was coming from. But at the same time, I think that I think they were being a little overly optimistic as to what could actually be achieved. So, yeah, that was kind of.
Can you define what you think harassment is?
Harassment is more or less, again, threatening violence, sending abusive, unconstructive messages to people repeatedly. Again, I can define what harassment is not. Harassment is not criticism, right? So again, there's so much of it, and you tend to find it in people who have a narcissistic streak. They equivalent, harassment and criticism are to them exactly the same thing. In my book, it's like, no, if you're being openly abusive, swearing, just being a horrible person or threatening violence, that's harassment. And then again, if you're following people to every platform and just spewing shit at them, just for the sake of doing it, then that's harassment. If you're trying to have a discussion with them, or offering well thought out, well reasoned criticism without abusive language or anything, that's not harassment. And I think there was a lot of deliberate muddying of the two.
Probably the last question on the Rat King thing, but Miss Sonata asks, wouldn't the Rat King describe all activist groups? Collective action isn't exclusive to this one group, she says.
Okay, there's a difference between being openly a member of an activist group and then quietly coordinating in the background and denying you do. Right? Again, Rat Kings by their nature are secret groups. They're coordination without openly coordination. So if you're a member of an activist group, I'm going to assume that you're coordinating with that activist group, right? You're a political group, you have a political purpose, you're going to be coordinating. Rat Kings are different. Rat Kings are people who are secretly in the background coordinating while claiming that they're not.
What do you think about how the media covered Gamergate?
The media had a narrative and they went with it. And again, it was once they'd decided that narrative and they more or less just, that was it, right? Once we realized that was what they were going to do and we weren't ever going to get a fair representation, I think a lot of people just sort of gave up and went, you know what? We're just going to enjoy the ride and do what we can. But no, again, I don't think the media was ever interested in covering it in any fair and balanced way.
If you were going to cover Gamergate as an act of journalism, how would you have done it?
I would have covered it in a much more neutral thing and just gone, okay, so is the precursors, again, actually gone out to the community. And the thing is, quite a few journalists did this. But they just got lost in the noise or they got ignored. They went out to the community and go, okay, so, give us feedback. Why is this going on? And actually interviewed all sides in good faith and gone, all right, here's one side, here's the other, here's my assessment of why this is happening, and gone from there. I mean, I'm not very good with terms of journalism stuff, but again, I would have basically presented both, tried to be as neutral as possible, and gone, right, this is what these are the events that led up to it, and here's what both sides are saying, and presented it and going, okay, well then it's up to the reader to make their own decision. But because Brandon O'Reilly, there was a few other journalists I remember back in the day who did cover it in a reasonably neutral way, but their articles just got buried, right? And again, now we know why. Again, they were sort of pushing out on Twitter, and now we know why.
Brandon Orselli, you mean?
Yeah, that's it. And there are a few others as well, but I do remember at the time reading some reasonably balanced articles, but they just got absolutely buried, right? And said, now we know why.
Well, you mentioned Brandon Orselli. Was there anybody else you wanted to name who you thought did a good job?
I'd have to go back and look. It's been 10 years.
Did anyone, well, you already talked about the Kotaku writer, but aside from the Kotaku journalist, did anyone in the media reach out to you for an interview to discuss the movement?
No, not really. We actually reached out to a number of people. Funnily enough, we reached out to a member of Parliament who is, she was the Australian, well, it used to be the Australian Sex Party. It's now the Australian Reason Party. And they were fully happy to talk to us until their membership had basically barked at them, and then they threw us under the bus.
That is unfortunate.
Yeah, again, we wanted to have, and the thing is, we wanted to have a discussion in terms of the Australian, the censorship laws at the time, stuff that was all within the, at the time, the ASP's platform. We're like, yeah, we wish to have these discussions, and we wish to give you a perspective from people from the gaming community. And again, I'll have to go back through my old Gmail, but I've got the emails where they were back and forth. And then, someone within the progressive ranks got wind that they'd been talking to us, and then as soon as they got barked at, It's like, they ran off like a scald, someone with a bucket of hot water on a scalded dog. They just went nope, 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 and then they to the point that they published a statement on their website disavowing us. Right? And you're like, yeah. So we had to pick a bit of bitumen out of our teeth for that one, but it was interesting. It gave us a lot of we got to see how the sausage was made, and it did affect in some respects the views of a lot of the members in terms of even just local politics.
Well, that is disheartening.
Mm.
Did any of the media outlets or journalists that you reached out to about the story or actually, I'll just ask because that's a separate question,
Yeah.
technically.
Mm.
Did you reach out to any journalists or media outlets who wrote articles about GamerGate to correct misinformation?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Any luck?
Nah. At best, we were ignored.
Are
And
there
again,
any
we'd send them emails with read receipts. We could see the emails were read. Yeah, no corrections were ever issued.
Are there any specific articles or videos you want to discuss?
No, not off the top of my head. Again, it was sort of 10 years ago. There's been sort of, Short Fat guys like Short Fat Otaku have done some fantastic ones with much more well researched in terms of right. Here's the history and just a end to end explanation with well cited sources. So there's a lot of people out there who are doing the job that journalists should be doing, and I think there's a lot of resentment in the journalist community for that. Like there's amateurs who are doing their job better than they are.
Did the media's coverage of Gamergate increase or decrease your trust in the media?
Oh, decreased massively. And I think that was a lot of people because when they saw what was actually happening versus what they were told, there was just that massive disconnect. But I think there's been an overall, that's been part of a trend that's been happening over the last 10 years anyway, because it's not just GG, but there's a lot of people just going, well, hang on, I'm being told one thing, but the media's outright telling me something else. Yeah.
If a journalist who got Gamergate wrong, in your view, is reading this now, what do you want them to reconsider?
I would like them to reconsider and just re-examine it. 10 years on, go and have a look at it and go look at what you originally wrote versus what's, now you can go back with sort of the 2020 hindsight of history and maybe go back and just, do a retrospective and go, okay, this is what we thought at the time. This is the stuff that's come out since. Were they actually wrong or not? And I think, and again, in a lot of cases, you find out that, hey, there was a lot of bad stuff that was incorrect. The rest of it. The problem is, I don't see them doing that because, again, the same sort of journalists who were writing that stuff back then are either still in the industry or, the people who wrote those articles are still in the industry and probably have been promoted to editor. So it's not like they're going to go back and sort of correct their peers, as it were.
What do
It
you
would be
think?
nice. Happy to be wrong, but yeah.
What do you think the media can learn from how they covered Gamergate?
That would require them to want to learn the lessons. That's the problem. I think there's a lot they could learn, but again, look at the stuff that came out of the SPJ and that sort of stuff. But as we've seen in the last 10 years, they really haven't learned anything. Even now, they haven't learned anything. So,
Do you have any thoughts on the Wikipedia article about Gamergate?
apart from it being next to useless, because again, Wikipedia's been captured by the same crowd. Again, it's people who want that sense of power. Again, Wikipedia has the same problem that Reddit and all these other things have. Is the people moderating it are of a very particular political bent, and they actively chase out and ban anyone who's not on board with them. So any article that has a political bias is going to be biased explicitly one way, and anyone who's attempting to correct it just gives up because then they're not allowed to do it, even if they've got the receipts to prove it. It won't be allowed. So I said it's more or less next to useless. It's no better than the journalist articles we've seen.
Would you like to see, quote, the narrative, unquote, on Gamergate change in your lifetime?
That'd be nice. I don't expect it to happen, but it'd be nice to correct the record eventually.
Why are you pessimistic?
Because I've seen the media behaviour in the last 10 years. We've seen it, and we've not seen it get any better. In fact, it's getting worse. And there's really kind of no incentive to correct it. The industry, it seems to be completely unwilling to quote unquote self-regulate. The other side of the coin, in terms of, if you want to go to the right wing side, the right wing media is, for lack of a better term, they have no interest in it, either correcting it or assisting in any way, shape, or form. So it's, I would, when I start seeing evidence of actual positive change, then I'll be more optimistic, but I haven't seen it yet.
Has your conscious experience as a human been made worse to any degree because of the negative narrative about Gamergate?
Not really. It hasn't affected me psychologically. It's, in some respects, it's sort of toughened me up in a lot of ways, but it's more a case of, again, I look at it as, constructive. It was a constructive experience for me, in terms of learning a lot about the way the world works. But again, it really hasn't affected me like that because I didn't make it my identity to begin with. It was just something I was a part of. And so, I took it as a positive learning experience, for good or ill.
What's your favorite video game?
At the moment, I have spent a ridiculous amount of hours in Oxygen Not Included. I don't particularly want to say how many hours, but it's probably a few thousand. Been playing a fair bit of Helldivers lately. Said Stardew Valley, Deep Rock Galactic, Cyberpunk. Just looking at what I've got on my perpetually installed on my machine. So yeah, all sorts. Depends on my mood.
Next question is, did you attend a Gamergate meetup? Well, we already know the answer. So do you want to tell
Yeah,
us some
I organised.
awesome stories from the meetups you organized or went to that weren't yours?
I only ever went to the ones that I organised. I don't think anyone else in my city organised meets. So actually, no, I lie. I went to one up in San Francisco when I was up there. Where I got to meet the GGSF crowd, and no, we had great fun. It was just nice to hang out, chat, meet new people, a few drinks, be the Australian in a strange land. But other than that, again, it's kind of, yeah, we were the only ones organising meets down here in Melbourne because we're, relatively small community. Again, Melbourne in Australia being essentially of a reasonably progressive bent, we really weren't going to get much traction down here. But I was happy to, meet the people we did, and said we're all still great friends after it. So 10 years later.
Do you want to talk about the friendships you made during Gamergate?
Oh yeah, said I've currently said some of my best friends, like currently are the people I met during GG. Said one of them got married last year, and I got to go up to his wedding, and it was great fun. Said we still keep in touch. We've helping each other through good times and bad. It said it was been overall positive experience. I said we've been fantastic mates over it. So it's really all it came down to is I sort of saw the need that like we can't just do this online. It's I think a lot of people are sort of, I'm seeing articles these days of people realizing it's like you can't just have friendships online. At some point you kind of have to, excuse me, where feasible, actually meet up IRL, because otherwise you just lack that level of connection. And I'm glad we did, and it had worked out fantastic.
Do you have any thoughts on Vivian James or other Gamergate related art projects?
I said I'm glad that we managed to get that mascot, and it was just the community ran with it. I said my wife's probably a better one to ask about that. I enjoy and retweet her art of Vivian wherever possible.
I just retweeted her earlier today, and I'll be interviewing her too, I guess, right?
Yep, yep.
Cool, cool. And was this a relationship that did you meet before Gamergate or did you meet through Gamergate?
Oh no, we met way before. So we've known each other for married for 13 years this year. No, we knew each other well before that. So no, we were married before GG, but I said it was They said a lot of friends that have met up with my wife, and they're friends with. I said they're friends with me. They're friends with her. Said one of the other guys, he's managed to, due to his shit posting on Twitter, actually met his now wife. So
What was
it
your
worked out well.
glad to hear it. But what was your favorite moment during GamerGate?
Oh, look, I have to admit, the funniest one was that Kotaku journalist turning up and just, that was just a really funny moment of just seeing him all puffed up, just absolutely deflate in front of Mr. Shiba. But yeah, that's the one that sticks out. But the rest of it was just more a case of just getting a bunch of friends. We can sit down, we can have a drink, we could have a chat, we could shit post in real life, and not have to worry about it. We don't have to self-censor. It's very interesting in that it seems how much more prevalent this has become. For example, I got a friend of my wife's who lives in a different city, and she is of the LGBT community. She tends to love girls as much as I do. And funnily enough, we were out for dinner and having a chat, and we're chatting, and she's trying to discuss the issues that she's having with her current girlfriend. Now, when she's talking to me, I can see she's self-censoring. She's basically trying to find any other word than butch, right? Yes, she has a type. She likes her butch lesbians, right? She's a bit of a tomboy, but she has a particular type. And I'm like, I can see it every time she just sort of have this phrase. I'm like, and I've sort of looked at her. I'm like, because I've known her as long as I've known my wife, and I've gone, sweetie, you don't need to censor yourself around me. You can say it. She's like, what? I'm like, just say butch. It's like, yes. She and as soon as she's realized, I'm like, because she's been around that community, she's suddenly had to self-censor. And as soon as I've sort of reminded her, like, no, you've known me for more than, you've known me for a long time. You're never going to offend me. And it was just interesting to see her relax and the stress level drop. And suddenly she's not self-centering. She's being herself. She's not sitting there having to pre-think about everything she's about to say in case she's going to offend someone. Now, funnily enough, I have this discussion with other people who've messaged me on Twitter, and DM'd me and in other forums, and we've had this chat, and they tend to be the younger generation. And I have to sort of say to them, hey, I'm incredibly laid back. There's literally nothing you're going to be able to say to me to offend or upset me. You'd have to actively be trying, and you don't know me well enough to be able to do it. And you can see that they suddenly relax, and there's just this weight lifted off their shoulder. They can talk. They're like, oh, I don't have to worry about, quote unquote, being cancelled. They're not going to yell at me. And I just find this, in some respects, I find it absolutely horrific that people have this mindset now that they're so terrified to relax and be themselves because someone is going to jump down their throat about something they say. They don't. Again, it's the difference between trying to be actively offensive and accidentally saying something out of context or something that can be construed as offensive. And again, it just seems to be that there's so many people have been shell shocked with this thing of, well, even if I accidentally say something that someone can take as offensive, I've got to monitor myself just in case. All right, I think it's really harming a lot of people.
Yeah, and I've I've actually seen this too. It's so funny too because you can recognize too like the moment if you're like paying attention. I guess if it's in person, excuse me, or over video, you can tell the moment that they relax and they're like, oh, actually, wait, I can talk about whatever I want here. I won't be I won't be immediately ostracized or condemned or thrown to the wolves.
And it's funny when you watch him talk because I dubbed it hitching. Like again from gaming, you see things where you just get that moment where they stop for a sec. And again, I've just internally dubbed it hitching because I'm talking to people and I can see them hitching. I can see them about to say something and then they're having to quickly do that momentary process in their head going, is this going to get me in trouble? Right? And then, you can tell they were about to say something that someone somewhere may construe as offensive, and they immediately go and, change their language. And you can just see that hitching because they're having to stop for a sec and think of an alternate word. Right? And it's funny. She's like, okay, stop it. You're hitching. And I explained to them what hitching is. I'm like, no, you're self-censoring. I see what you're doing. Stop it. Just say what you think. You don't need to, you're not going to offend me. I'm not, and again, I'm recording this or anything. I don't care. You can have opinion. And he said, it's just interesting to see people relax and then they can be themselves.
Well, and
right?
I because I'm going through and I'm transcribing and then making videos out of
Mm,
as I transcribe each interview.
mm.
I'm making videos of them, and I look at some of the first couple I did, which I've had to look at, of course, because I edit them and transcribe them into the book form, and I even recognize a few moments where I myself was like that, but very early on. In fact, the first interview I did with Oron Darklord, there's a moment where we're talking about Starship Troopers, and obviously you know that Heinlein has basically been smeared as being like this like evil Nazi because of basically that work, but some of his other work as well, unfairly.
Oh yeah, I'm familiar with his work, and you look at his later work, and you're like, no, he was just nuts.
Yeah. Well,
The thing is, Heinlein's stuff.
a lot of his work. Well, God, I'll
Yeah,
let you. God.
yeah. Well, again, Heinlein's work again was a product of its time. It's like a lot of stuff, right? Again, you look at when he wrote that stuff. I'm thinking was it just post World War Two? Was it before that?
Well,
World War One.
he wrote for decades. I mean, he lived. Let's see, Robert.
Yeah.
I think the 30s, I believe, 1930s up
Yeah,
until
yeah,
his death.
yeah, yeah. So
So
yeah. But so he was he was old enough to have seen the if not lived through World War One, seen the immediate.
1947 until his death, basically. So
So that was when he was writing or when he was born.
well, he was born in 1907, and
Yeah.
he
So hang on,
wrote from
that's my point.
1947
Yeah,
onward. Yeah.
yeah. But my point is, he lived through.
Oh
When he
wait,
was a
I'm
kid.
sorry. It looks
Yeah.
like he might have written some like short works in the
Yeah. But my
1941.
point is, he lived in that period, World War One, World War Two. So he, and I think he was German as well, wasn't he?
He's American.
But American. Okay, but still, he's lived through World War One, World War Two. So he's seen that, what happened. Even in American, it's like World War One, World War Two had a massive effect on society, and a lot. Like you said, any stuff that's written around then is going to be a reflection of that, right?
Well, but the
good or
thing is,
ill.
like, his work, like Starship Troopers, isn't even like a racist book. Like, in fact,
No,
like,
no, it's not. No, no,
yeah,
no, no.
but
But he's
it's
going to be drawing.
misportrayed as that.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
misportrayed
yeah.
as
And
that.
again, that's pretty.
But anyway,
Verhoeven's
so
fault.
I caught
Yeah.
myself getting back on
Yeah,
topic. I caught
yeah.
myself. I was like, oh well, how much do I want to talk about this, given
Mm,
his unfair reputation? And then I caught
yeah.
myself, and I'm like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm gonna say whatever the fuck I want. And I even say that like mid-interview with Oron. So like throughout the way, there have been many throughout the project, and many other points too, many other instances.
Mm,
Some of which I could name, but it'd be boring.
yeah.
Um, where I'd
But
be
the
like,
thing is, yeah.
I'd be like, think, should I self-censor here? And I'm like, nah, fuck it, I'm not going to. And then like now I don't at all.
Yeah. But here's the thing. Going back to what with with the journalist crowd is, we're lucky. We have that luxury, right? So I know for a fact if people called up my current employer and started spewing shit about me, my current employer is just going to go, "That's nice," and hang up on them because I'm, without blowing my horn too much, I'm too valuable to them, right, for what I do. So the old joke about "fuck you" money, right? The old John Goodman monologue from The Gambler, where he's just like, "Oh, you've got fuck you money, so you've got a reasonable amount of financial security that if people come along and try and screw with your life, you're like, yeah, fuck you." And you and I, we're lucky we have that. The thing is, the journalists in the gaming press do not, and I think that's part of their problem. Even if they want to, as an individual, do the right thing, they know they don't have that luxury. It's kind of a golden cage because, well, not even a golden cage these days. It'd be sort of, gold-plated tin. They know if they go against it, and it's the same in the gaming industry, and I would say it's the same in the the Western media industry, is if you go against that go against that mindset, you'll never work in town again, right? And again, you kind of look at what happened with Gina Carano, and then I'm trying to think, what's the name of the actor who played Vision? Because that was he had a story like that. Right, where Paul Bettany, that's it. Because you remember that Paul Bettany had an acting career for a while, and then he just disappeared off the face of the earth, and then he showed up again in Age of Ultron. Do you know the story behind that?
I do not. I'm not a huge like Marvel fan.
No,
I
no,
still
no.
haven't
It's
seen
not
Endgame.
even. No, that's fine, but it's not even a Marvel thing. It's Paul. It's what the key points of the story are. Paul Bettany was an actor, and he turned up in a whole heap of stuff originally. Then he was at a Hollywood party, and he got groped by a Hollywood producer. He just went, because he was another one of these ones where he just went, nope, and just like, yeah, can you get your fucking hands off me? And then he got blacklisted, right? You'll never work in this town again. And he just had a phone call from his agent basically telling him this. And the guy is literally sitting on the curb in LA crying because he's just been told that your acting career is over because you got groped by a Hollywood producer and said no. And it was the fact that Kevin Feige literally happened to be walking past at the time, recognized Paul, and that he was so upset and had a chat with him and figured out what was going on. And went, I'll tell you what, I'm doing a movie coming up and I need, I'm doing these Marvel movies, I need a voice actor. Would you be interested in doing it? And Feige, to his credit, fought to get Bettany into those because he had the Hollywood crowd going, oh, no, he's blacklisted. We can't have him in movies. And no, Feige, to his credit, fought to get Bettany in to do those. Right? So, again, I can see with the media crowd why they have to toe the line because the alternative is unemployment and financial destruction.
If you could have changed one thing about GamerGate, what would it be?
It's a good question. I honestly can't think off the top of my head what we would change because I couldn't. You'd have to say what would I actually have control over changing? That's the thing. If you sort of gave me godlike powers and went, okay, you can change. Pick an alternate universe.
Just pick anything you want, like godlike powers. You change whatever the fuck you want.
Yeah. So again, it would have been the whole getting the media, like having the higher up editors actually go, no, you're gonna cover this honestly, right? Stop pushing a narrative. Put more fairly, right? Quit the bullshit and actually do your jobs properly as journalists. And funnily enough, again, going back to Hunter S. Thompson, he has this line he has a whole rant in Fear and Loathing in 72, where he one of the things that GG was always pushing was objective journalism. Now, I actually have Fear and Loathing 72 here, and I'll see if I can remember where the passage is. But you have Hunter going off basically saying he hates the term objective journalism. It's like it's a contradiction in terms. And he sort of has this rant where he's like, I've never seen it in my industry, and the most objective journalism I've seen is basically the automated camera system that looks for shoplifters, right? You're not going to get it. He has this nice rant about it, because again, he worked in the industry and he knew what it was like. He really sort of, and I think back in the day, like we were very naive at the time. So it would be a case of more knowing what I know now and be able to go back to them. I would have, potentially suggested a different course in some respects, but I don't know that people would have listened. And I think a lot of us were like, no, we were sort of wide-eyed and naive and just like, oh no, we can change shit. We got them on. We can get them to behave. And yeah, we didn't know how deep the rot went.
What would you personally have done differently during Gamergate?
Nothing I can think of. Again, I would have probably organised more meets. But I think from my little world, it worked out super well for all concerned. I probably wouldn't have bothered talking with political entities and reaching out to the media because now I know that they were either going to throw us under the bus or ignore us. I would have spent the time on something more productive.
Let's say it's 10 years from now, and an online movement is looking to Gamergate for guidance for their movement. What advice do you have for them?
Focus on that which you can control. So again, if you're have a clear set of goals. What are you trying to achieve? And what can you as individuals, admittedly individuals working together, what can you control and what can you realistically do? Right? So again, it's the whole set realistic goals and work towards them. And accept that you're probably going to fail, but it's still noble to try. Because on the off chance you might succeed more than you think.
What have you personally learned from Gamergate?
Media corruption is way worse than I ever thought it was. A vehement dislike of politicians, but I have learnt a lot more about the how politics actually works, how the sausage is made. It's given me a lot more respect for the Australian political voting process because I actually went out and, again, one of the things that GG motivated me to do is because I'd seen job ads for working in elections. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go and work in elections. I'm going to make sure that, things are done. And I get to see how Australian elections are conducted. Gave me massively much more faith in the Australian electoral system. I said I may not like the outcome of elections, but at least I know the process is 100% legit. So in some respects, it helped in that.
Do you see parallels between Gamergate and the way society currently discusses issues?
Oh, most definitely. There seems to be a very, and again, this is kind of driven by the American media complex, but we get cultural bleed over here in Australia as well. As there seems to be a very one-sided. Again, you have a very, there is a particular narrative that tends to get pushed, and it tends to get, you'll have one side of the political spectrum will fall into that narrative lockstep, and then the other side will fall into a counter narrative lockstep, and off to the races you go. So it's sort of more or less taught me how that works, and to look at any issue more with like a historian lens than a media lens. So what I mean by that is historians realize that every source has biases, which is why they get as many original sources as possible. They look at where the sources agree and where they differ. Where they agree, it's probably what happened. Where they differ is the more fuzzy areas. So yeah, I've had to sort of take more of a historian view of any given issue when I'm reading about it.
And we will talk about how I'm doing in just a bit here. What do you think of the leaderless and decentralized nature of Gamergate?
Has its pros and cons, but the pros are that you can sort of, as long as you can herd the cats, you can get things done, and you can sort of let people focus on, some people are better at other things, and it made it more resilient to it being taken over and derailed. Because as we've seen with other organizations, again, we saw that with what happened with Moot at 4chan, right? Moot got compromised because he got tricked by the Gorka girl. And you had all these other organizations that they all got compromised because they had centralized leadership. And once that leadership was co-opted, that was it. Again, you saw it with Wikipedia, saw it with 4chan, you saw it with Reddit. So it made the GG crowd much more resilient to that. And so, we all kind of had the same goals, and they were publicly well defined, so we could all work towards it in our own way. Which is, I think, why it lasted as long as it did. Had it had some sort of central organization, all it would have taken is, I guarantee that the other side would have immediately tried to sort of infiltrate, co-opt it, and then it would have just fallen apart, because people would have just looked at that and gone, yeah, no, you don't represent us, we're going to go off and do something else.
You say Moot was co-opted by the Gawker girl. What do you mean?
Oh, you don't know that story?
No, I'd like to learn it.
Okay. So during the back days of GG, people were openly discussing it in 4chan. It came out that Moot, Matthew Poole was, I think it was one, he was offered a job at Google, but two, he ended up in a romantic relationship with a girl who worked for Gorka, who essentially honeypotted him and then cucked him with another guy. But it was, funnily enough, as soon as Moot started having a relationship with that girl, suddenly the mods started cracking down on GG stuff super hard, and all the posts started getting deleted.
So
So,
people have speculated, or do they have evidence that
oh no, we have receipts on that.
the reason Moot decided to censor the
Yep,
discussion was because of his girlfriend?
yep, yep,
You'll send me the receipts?
yep. Look, I'm literally looking them up now.
Okay. Would you want to do a Gamergate reunion, sort of a big meetup once every 10 years or something like that?
We kind of do that already. Like I said, the wedding I just went to this year, late last year, was essentially a GG meetup. We all ended up going up to a wedding in another state, and it was all the GG crowd because we're all friends. So, no, we still do that. And we still kind of do that now because all the crew I hang around with, like, we're all tabletop gamers. We all hang out. So, we all end up at someone's house for a barbecue or a tabletop game or something. So, we all kind of socialize outside of that. So, we do that anyway.
Yeah, I keep in touch with some of the St. Louis people, but
Yeah.
I mean like one that's everybody from across the entire, either one in each continent every 10 years or so, or one massive one for people from all over the world who participated will come back together on both sides, even if some of the more moderate
Yeah,
anti-GG people even want to show up.
Yeah, again, I wouldn't be against it. Like, we might organise one. Like, for the 10-year this year, we might organise one. But yeah, so the problem I think is we'll run into all the same issues that we ran into last time. Is you'll just have the anti-crowd just messing with it for fun. But no, again, I think we're going to do it anyway. Actually, now that you mention it, I probably will. Probably organise one for this August.
Well, I don't think I can fly to Australia, but
No, no, but for the any of the Australian people listening, I'll probably, if
yeah,
you're
get
anywhere
in
near
touch with
Melbourne,
them.
I'll
Where can
probably.
people find you to talk to you about this?
They can find me on Twitter at Project Wombat. That's usually the best way to get a hold of me these days.
Have you ever
So
thought
DMs
about
are open. Yeah.
Have you ever thought about writing a book or other project relating to Gamergate?
Not really. I'm not. I like creative people, but I know I'm not a creative person. Um, and to be honest, I'm like, my little bit of it is just one part of the overall story. I mean, if someone, like yourself, if you're writing a book, and I'm happy to sort of kick in my 2 cents, but I don't think I'd have enough content there for a book.
For you personally, what would Gamergate being successful have looked like, and was Gamergate successful in your eyes?
Oh, look, I think it was about as successful it was potentially going to be in terms of we got legislative change, we kind of forced the industry kicking and screaming to at least start doing disclosures, right? And you had a lot of people who sort of had really pie in the sky, very unrealistic, again idealistic, noble, but the fact that we were going to completely chase all the bad actors out of the industry, and it was going to, it was going to be this much better games that are free of all this crowd, that aren't going to have this artistic censorship, that are not going to have the horrible progressive politics pushed into everything. Yeah, after a while it became quite apparent that was never going to happen, because the people who were doing this were able to it was clear that companies were listening to them and not the consumers. So, but I think given what we were dealing with and the magnitude of what we were dealing with, I think we did get quite a bit accomplished, and we should be proud of it. And the fact, again, it's still the fact that we're the people are still looking under their beds as like a Gamergate under the bed. Like the fact that they're still occasionally waking up in cold sweats thinking of what they went through with us. Like, I'll take that.
I don't normally ask this, but because of the recent controversy, and we talked about this in the beginning for about an hour almost, um, what is something that would make what would make how can the people who have done the bad stuff, or I guess, well, I'm trying to think of how I should phrase this since it's not a normal question. Sorry. Oh, I guess what should people take away in regard to the Sweet Baby Inc. controversy from
Again,
Gamergate and from.
it depends on your audience, right? So, for example, what I would suggest for the games companies is, again, learn, like, you need to take a long, hard look at your marketing and you're complaining that these games are losing money. I said, like, for example, Warner Brothers learned exactly the wrong lesson, right? Harry Potter game was authentic to the fans. Everyone loved it. They made money hand over fist, right? They then proceeded to employ Sweet Baby for the likes of Suicide Squad, and everyone hated it because the writing was terrible and they treated these characters with utter disrespect. So even, again, I'm just going to look at this as entirely as a business project team, right? Sweet Baby are bad at their job, right? They clearly are not writing well, and if you're looking at the way that writing is going, to be honest, I think in a lot of cases, and this is media in general, is you're seeing like people who can actively do good writing and do things like well written characters, well written stories, and are actively being kept out of the industries because they don't have the correct politics. Even if they, and I'm not even saying, oh, well, they're right wing. I'm like, no, even if they're like politically neutral, because as we've seen with this crowd, you're not allowed to be politically neutral. You have to be on board with their shit or not at all. So again, I think we're seeing that people who can write really good stuff, like Amy Hennig, are being actively chased out and kept out of the industry, and the industry is suffering for it. So I'm thinking, to be honest, I'm optimistic about the future, because I think a lot of what we've seen has been a function of economics, right? In that debt has been essentially free since at least the 2008 crash, right? You've had interest rates at essentially zero for quite a while. That's now no longer the case, right? So you're now having companies who could just they could throw, all this stuff at the wall, and as long as they had one or two hits, it would pay for all the failures. Well, now that debt is no longer free, that economic has changed. You're now having to have stuff that has to have a return on investment that's at least, I think when interest rates, let's just pick a number, say 5%, you need to have an ROI that's at least 10% once you pay for all your costs and everything else if you still want to make a profit. So I think what we're seeing is the last gasps of this stuff, in that companies are now going to have to actually go back to going, what do consumers want? Right? Because we could get money from venture capital and ESG funds, etc. Well, all those ESG funds are now being liquidated. They used to exist, and BlackRock and Co have liquidated those to the point of $14 trillion odd dollars. So I think that money's drying up, because I think they've also realized, people don't want that. So I think what we're seeing now is projects that were greenlit 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago. We're seeing those, and I think the stuff that we're going to be seeing coming out in the next 5 years is going to sort of trend a lot more back to what people like versus what the companies think people should like.
When it comes to the GamerGate stuff, Project Wombat, if you could do it all over again, would you?
Absolutely.
What do you think of this interview project?
Oh, look, I think it's great because, again, you get to talk to people who actually, I'm a fan of interview projects where you talk to people who are actually involved in things. So, again, I'm a fan of things like documentaries. There's quite a few on Netflix I've been watching where they're talking to the people who were involved in the thing at the time. So you actually get reasonable, from the horse's mouth, as it were. So, well, look, like I said, the interview process for you has been great. It's been nice and neutral. You're not jumping down throat. You're not trying to push narrative or anything like that. It's like, as long as it's done in an objectively neutral fashion or as much as possible, then yeah, great.
Well, do you think that I've been objective or tried to be objective?
Again, my point is, you're not trying to push me in a direction, one way or the other, right? You're asking me questions, you're letting me give my answers, and you're not guiding me, going, oh, but what about this? What about Because again, you've seen that in other interviews as well, where they do very leading questions. I'm like, no, I'm trying to lead you into a trap. I'm trying to lead you down a particular path.
Well,
Right.
I have in some of my interviews because I do play devil's advocate with people. I don't do that with like some of the basic questions too much anymore because like I've already done that 400 times.
Mm.
And so like it's been
Yeah,
well
but
represented a
there's
variety of
yeah,
perspectives in here. Plus I've interviewed people on the other side. You're right. I do try to
mm,
I've put a lot of effort into making sure the
yeah,
question lists are really good and neutral and fair. And I've even gotten
yeah.
anti-Gamergate people's feedback on that. But like I do some of the interviews. Like when I interviewed the trolls, when I interviewed Pterodax and
Mm,
Avius, especially Pterodax, really. Like what I did was I actually I went in with like I have a ton of evidence on the stuff that you've done,
mm,
and I'm going to confront you on this because I think that's part of my job too. And like,
yeah, yeah.
am I being a neutral person in that context? Probably not.
No,
But
but
like
again,
I've
that's subjective. That's the point. Is if you're the other side of that is if you're just softballing me, right? You're just throwing softball questions. You're not challenging me on anything. That's not healthy either,
yeah
right?
yeah. Well, how do you? Here's a question too. How do you? Most of the people I interview, I don't think that they're like fundamentally evil. Like even if they've done bad stuff, I'll bring it up and I'll be tough on them about it.
Mm,
But I hope that they'll reform and do better things in the future. How
mm,
would I approach it? How should one approach it if they don't think that's going to happen? If they know or they highly suspect that after this interview is done, the person is going to go back, has already done a whole lot of terrible things, and is probably going to go back and do more terrible things in the future over the course of their lives and harm others or harm the public.
Goes back to my point on focusing that which you can control. You can't control that person's behavior. You can make the best effort and say, hey, this is harming people, etc. But at the end of the day, dysfunctional people are going to dysfunction, right? One of the things I used to volunteer for is emergency services here in Australia. It's called a state emergency service. Now, one of the things they hammer into you with SES is you can't save everyone. So they give the analogy of, okay, so you have a guy and his friend, they're working in an old big oil storage tank. They've drained the oil, they're cleaning it out. One guy gets overcome by fumes and passes out. His friend, in the good intentions, goes in there, puts a ladder down, goes in there to rescue his friend. He passes out. So now you have two people to rescue, right? Wash, rinse, repeat. And there's many stories of this in real life, sort of thing. So my point is, yeah, you can do the honourable thing, you can do the moral thing, and you can point out their bad behaviours. You can't change, they've got to have to want to change, and they're going to have to, and this is a problem. Actually, it's a very interesting psychological quirk. If you ever, and you can try and see if you can incorporate this into your questions. If you think someone's a narcissist, there's actually a thing called the narcissistic blind spot. And it's 2 questions. So you go, would you consider yourself a narcissist? The first question is, do you consider being a narcissist a bad thing? A narcissistic person will always say no. Second question, do you consider yourself a narcissist? They will always say yes. It's a weird psychological quirk. They will it's almost never answer negative to those questions.
I don't know if I believe this.
No, well, I'll find the research article, but it's colloquially called the narcissistic blind spot, because again, it's a symptom of their dysfunctional thinking. Because narcissists are incapable of seeing themselves as a bad person. They know they are narcissists. Actually, I can recommend, if you want to see some good lectures on it, there's a specialist on YouTube she's a psychologist she's a specialist in dealing with narcissists. I'll link it to you.
But it's the reason I ask. Well, yeah. I'm not gonna. I'll be relatively opaque, I guess. Or is that the right?
Transparent.
Opaque is non-opaque.
Yeah.
No, wait. Opaque is non-transparent. Yes, I will be non-transparent. Yeah. Is the reason I'm asking this question. For understandable reasons, I think.
Yeah.
But
okay.
If I think people are doing bad things and will continue to do so, I think that should be exposed. And I also think that it's my role to expose this. And I just don't know how best to do that.
Well, again, you could expose it, and it's up to the individual as to what they do about it, right? Because you can say, hey, you're doing a bad thing. Here's why I think you're doing a bad thing. Here's objective proof you're doing a bad thing, right? And if the person themselves says, can say, oh, you're right, I am doing a bad thing, then it's up to them to change. But the problem is, if you've got dysfunctional people who go, well, no, I don't think I'm doing anything wrong. All right. And the problem is that you can show them, you could, extreme example, you get someone who's, strangling puppies. I've got a video of you strangling puppies. Strangling puppies is a bad thing. If they're a dysfunctional person, they're going to logic themselves out of it. Going, no, I'm not. I'm not doing a bad thing. Those puppies weren't going to be adopted. I'm giving them a merciful death by strangling them. I'm not doing anything wrong. Right, that is an extreme example. I don't advocate strangling puppies, but my point is dysfunctional people will do that. They will logic why they're not a bad person. No, I'm doing it. I'm doing it for a little bit. And funnily enough, with people doing writing, it actually makes really good villains. I'm doing a horribly villainous thing for good reasons.
Some people reading this might hold a negative view of GamerGate. Do you have anything you want to say to these people?
I would encourage you, if you've got a negative view of GamerGate, I would encourage you to sort of reach out, have a chat with people. My DMs are open, have a chat, right? I would more than happy to have a chat with you and say, okay, you have negative reasons. Where have these negative things come from? What leads you to believe these negative things, right? And I'm willing to give you a perspective from the other side. And if at the end of the day you still believe it was an overall negative thing, okay, you are free to believe that, based on whatever inputs and things that you've read. All I encourage it, and people should be open to. There's no shame in changing a position. There's no shame in saying, you know what, I believed thing at the time, evidence has since come out to the contrary, or it's softened my position a little. Get out of the black and white thinking. Like, so much of the stuff these days is black and white thinking. It's good and evil, black and white. It's, being the history nerd that I am, really a lot of history is nuanced. It's shades of grey. Everything has both good and bad aspects, but on the balance, things were good, things were bad. Like, going back to my First World War, stuff. Some of the best writing and creativity came out of people who served in the First World War in the most horrific circumstances, right? So we're talking people like J.R.R. Tolkien, who went through one of the worst battles in World War One, the Somme. A.A. Milne, guy came up with Winnie the Pooh. Who else? What's this? Hemingway. Hemingway served in World War One as an ambulance driver, right? So you can have people who've gone through horrific things and have still managed to make a positive outcome from it. So, you can argue that, World War One was just universally bad. Well, then again, you can say that there were positive things that came out of World War One, despite the human toll. Overall, it was a bad thing, but, silver linings and all that. So, yeah, you get people kind of, I think, would need to take a more nuanced view of events. It's very easy to fall into that black and white thinking because, in a lot of respects, it makes people feel good. I'm the good guy. I gives them that dopamine boost.
Well, hey.
But
yeah, more, please.
Yeah, but it's it. It really does. Said the world, history, events. It's never as simple as people portray, and and I would encourage people to be more inquisitive. Right, going, okay, well then what? There's got to be more to this, and I get it why some people aren't, but there's always that noble thing of people, be more engaged, do some more reading, just learn a bit more about a thing.
All right, well, hey, thank you so much for your story, Project Management Wombat. Is there anything else you want to talk about?
No, I'm actually good for the moment. Not off the top of my head, but if there's anything in the future, I'll drop you a line.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hey, thank you so much. And everyone in the audience here, we got, 6, 7 viewers. We're going to go ahead and raid Dev. I'll be on a panel with him I'll be streaming on my end, but it'll also be Wick as the host, and other people probably stream on their end as well, I presume, some of them at least. So yeah, go check out SFO. He's playing Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. And if you enjoyed this conversation, hit like, subscribe, leave a comment, and check out the other interviews I've done. Take care. Say hi to Dev.
Yeah. Thanks all. See you.